billion people. We have been there through every shift, every milestone.
Into the groove of what we need to get into.
Absolutely.
It says, wake up, Africa.
It is. It's time to rise and shine, everybody. You are listening to Channel Africa, where we bring you the African perspective. And we're broadcasting live from our studios here in Johannesburg, South Africa.
And of course, we'll be bringing you lots of stories. We're with you until for the next 3 hours. We're going to start by giving you a roundup of what's happening in and around our continent in terms of what you may have missed, and also what we can look forward to getting into the new day. It's Wednesday, the 14th of May. We're also going to be looking at Nigeria's Senate having passed 4 tax reform bills. We'll unpack that story later on the show.
Yeah, some of the headlines that we have in the news at the moment. Zimbabwe facing another political crisis. Find out more about that. And Kenya's courts grant the extradition of a former Afghan MP to the United States. We'll have more details on those stories and others after the news. As we say good morning to Tualani Tulo Mwepe and the sports headlines with Figile Lingwat.
SABC News. Africa.
Thanks, Peter, and good morning. A senior Democrat who serves on the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee says that it is baffling as to why the Trump administration is admitting South Africa's white Afrikaners for resettlements while continuing an indefinite suspension for thousands of other legitimate asylum seekers who have fled persecution. Senator G. released a statement pointing to what she called a United Nations, finding that no South Africans were eligible for refugee status. This comes as the U.S. government was told that it wouldn't help to resettle the Afrikaners. Sherwin Bryce Peace reports.
Bishop Sean Rowe writes that the church would not help with the resettlement of the newly arrived white South Africans, arguing that it was painful to watch one group of refugees selected in a highly unusual manner receive preferential treatment over many others who had been waiting in refugee camps or dangerous conditions for years. The church will now end its decades-long refugee resettlement partnership with the federal government, while Senator Jean Shaheen described the of Afrikaners in front of others in line as a clearly politically motivated decision and an effort to rewrite history. She called on the administration to clarify why the group qualified for resettlement and why they were prioritized over others, including Afghans and Sudanese who have fled their homes due to conflict and persecution.
Meanwhile, South Africa's African National Congress Party has rejected the U.S. decision to grant refugee status to 49 Afrikaners moving to the United States. However, the UN has not ruled that the group has refugee status. The South African government has strongly rejected the accusations. ANC national spokesperson Mahlengi Bengu Motsiri agrees with the South African government's position.
No section of our society is hounded, persecuted, or subject to ethnic victimization. These claims are a fabrication and a cowardly political construct designed to delegitimize our democracy and insult the sacrifices made by generations who fought for freedom. The misuse of refugee protections to shield right-wing anti-transformation elements is a violation of the spirit and letter of international law.
Zambia's foreign minister has warned diplomats against interfering in the country's affairs. This comes days after the U.S. ambassador raised concerns about the systematic theft of drugs donated to the southern African state. Mulambo Hayimbe said that there is an increasing tendency of envoys to ignore diplomatic channels, and this could undermine the spirit of mutual respect. Last week, the U.S. ambassador to Zambia, Michael Gonzalez, called a press conference to announce that the U.S. was cutting $50 million of health aid to Zambia because of the theft of life-saving medications that the U.S. had provided for patients. In his response, Hayimbe said that the addressing government through the media amounted to interference and was in breach of diplomatic conventions. The East London Magistrate Court in South Africa's Eastern Cape Province has freed Nigerian televangelist Timothy Amodoso and ruled that the Nigerian preacher will not be deported until his application for a review of Department of Home Affairs decision is heard in court. Amodoso appeared in the East London Regional Court on charges related to contravention of the Immigration Act following his arrest on Saturday in East London. NPA spokesperson Luxolo Kyali says that he was released because of the Home Affairs Department did not follow correct procedures, as he was supposed to be brought to court within 48 hours. Omodoso had filed an urgent High Court application to challenge his prohibited status in South Africa. South Sudan's authorities have yet to bring to justice those responsible for brutal and fatal attacks on civilians 3 years ago in southern Unity State. This is according to the international rights group Human Rights Watch. The rights group says that between February and May 2022, county officials in Unity State, with the backing of government forces and local military groups, carried out a series of systematic and coordinated attacks on civilians and civilian property in opposition-controlled territories. The government established a commission of inquiry in April 2022 to investigate the violence, but its findings were never made public. For any news stories that you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I am Nolutando Butelezi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Good morning, guys. I'm Figi Lilingwati. In the sports headline, Proteas coach comes out swinging against Kagiso Rabada's critics. And Paris Saint-Germain's dynamic right back has been crowned standout African player for the 2024-2025 season. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
And to also help you rise and shine is the team at the show, and that's Nolutando Butelezi on news. You just heard her there. You also just heard Fikile Lingwate. He's doing sports. On our economics news or business news is Bontle Headbush. On technical production is Mondli Mtambo. On production is Hlengiwe Mabaso, Joey Likhodi, and Pumuzo Ramagaza. Let's get into our Africa Roundup now, looking at some stories you may have missed that you need to know, and then also what we could be expecting in terms of developments happening in and around our continent. We go to Zimbabwe first, where the country is facing political crisis at a time when concerns have been raised about the level of corruption in that country. Recently, a war veteran, Blessed Geza, called for indefinite stayaways, insisting that President Emerson Mnangagwa is incapacitated and must leave office. On the contrary, others are calling for Mnangagwa to go for a third term. Zimbabwean journalist and activist Jealousy Mawarire has more.
The people are generally agitated because there is a lot of looting, a lot of corruption going around. And this corruption has actually become so pervasive. It's everywhere. It affects everyone to an extent that you have a sad situation where victims of a road traffic accident don't have basic things like plaster, like bandages. We have a situation where our hospitals are using cardboard boxes, as bandages. Cardboard boxes and sellotape. It's that dire.
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres says that peacekeeping showcases the power of multilateralism as he opened the United Nations Peacekeeping Ministerial Meeting in Berlin in Germany on Tuesday. The high-level political forum brings together around 1,000 participants, including foreign and defense ministers from approximately 60 countries.
In travel spots around the world, blue helmets can mean the difference between life and death. And they're also a clear demonstration of the power of multilateral action to maintain, achieve and sustain peace. There is a long list of countries that have achieved durable peace with the support of UN peacekeeping, including Cambodia, Côte d'Ivoire, El Salvador, Liberia, Namibia, Mozambique, Sierra Leone and Timor-Leste. Many of these countries now themselves contribute troops. At the same time, we recognize that peace comes at a price. Through the decades, 4,400 peacekeepers have fallen in the line of duty. Their service and sacrifice will never be forgotten.
The UN support mission in Libya, or UNSMIL, says that they are alarmed by the unfolding security situation in the capital, Tripoli, with intense fighting and heavy weaponry in densely populated civilian areas. Spokesperson for the United Nations Secretary General, Stefan Dujarric, has more.
The mission calls on all parties to immediately cease fighting and restore calm, and it reminds all parties of their obligations to protect civilians at all times. Attacks on civilians and attack on civilian objects may amount to war crimes. UNSMIL fully supports the efforts of elders and community leaders to try to de-escalate the current tensions.
A court in Kenya has approved the extradition of a former Afghan MP to the United States. Zahir Kadir, the former Deputy Speaker of Afghanistan's parliament, is wanted in New York on charges of drug trafficking and the illegal possession of military-grade firearms. Akisa Wandera reports.
Once a significant figure in Afghanistan, Kadir now finds himself at the center of an extradition battle. Kenyan authorities, acting on a request from the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, detained him based on an arrest warrant issued in the United States in March. Kadir has denied the charges of narcotics importation conspiracy and possession of machine guns. He says the case is politically motivated. His lawyer said the court ignored key defense points and will appeal the ruling.
The World Health Organization has warned that rising malnutrition rates in Gaza as a result of Israel's continued blockading of aid could have a lasting impact on an entire generation. The organization says the lack of food could result in stunted growth and impaired cognitive development in people. Waya Davies has more.
According to Gaza's health ministry, at least 31 people were killed in the latest Israeli airstrikes. Among the targets was the Nasser hospital in Khan Yunis. The Israeli army later acknowledged it had targeted the hospital from where it said Hamas was operating a command and control centre. Israel has vowed to carry out a new military push to control and hold much of Gaza, forcing hundreds of thousands of internal refugees to move once again. An Israeli blockade has prevented any food, fuel or medicines being allowed into Gaza for over 70 days.
And that's how we come to the end of today's edition of the Africa Roundup. We'll have more for you tomorrow morning after the 6 o'clock news. Stay with us, though. I'm going to be in conversation very shortly with Dr. David Matsanga, who's a political science and international risk expert, and he'll be unpacking for us some of the stories that have been playing out in West Africa. That's coming up in a few moments.
Este é o Caleidoscópio de Canal África, com Moreno Samo e João Yabalá.
O surto da cólera em Angola tem causado grande preocupação, afetando já mais de metade das províncias do país. Simultaneamente.
And every triumph, not just reporting history, but shaping the conversations that define Africa's future. For brands, media planning, and advertisers, Channel Africa is more than just a platform. It's an opportunity. With 25 compelling shows covering...
Dr. Jeremias Agostinho, médico e mestre em saúde pública, para partilhar a sua visão sobre o tema.
A doença, nesse momento, representa o maior risco de saúde pública que nós temos. Nos últimos anos, a nossa preocupação esteve sempre centrado com os casos de malária, os casos de tuberculose e também de infecção por VIH-Sida. A forma como, em pouco menos de 2 meses, os casos de cólera vêm aumentando, acaba por representar, nessa altura, um dos maiores desafios que o país tem. É expectável que, nesta fase, o número de casos venha a aumentar.
De segunda a sexta-feira, das 20 às 21 horas locais, este é o Caleidoscópio do Canal África.
Channel Africa, born to tell Africa's incredible stories.
Sigla Muinola Africa.
A nossa história contada por nós. Happy birthday to us.
Happy birthday to you.
Listen on SABC Plus, DSTV Audio Bouquet 802, and Satellite Channel PAS 10. Africa. It's time to plug into the heartbeat of the continent. Tune in to Channel Africa, your go-to radio station that broadcasts in 5 different languages.
L'Afrique du Sud célèbre la journée nationale du
Kabla hujaitwa kwa jina la Double K or more of our forests have been destroyed.
Partido Africano da Independência da Guiné.
See, Channel Africa represents every corner of this amazing land. From Lagos to Cape Town, Nairobi to Dakar, we've got you covered with the freshest news, music, and cultures. So, turn up the volume, feel the rhythm. And join the conversation. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Você é fluente em português? É apaixonado por rádio e quer trabalhar na África do Sul? Você tem documentos que o qualificam para trabalhar na África do Sul? Nesse caso, podemos ter uma oportunidade para você trabalhar no Canal África. Envie seu currículo e demonstração para Canal África at newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Lembre-se, se você não receber alguma resposta nossa em 14 dias, isso significa que você não foi selecionado. Canal África, a perspectiva africana.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine, weekdays 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
It's time now for one of our regular features. Every day at this time, we go around the continent to a particular region and take a look at some of the stories that have been playing out there. And today, we turn our attention to West Africa and take a look at some of the key political and economic developments that have been unfolding in the region. In Ghana, efforts are underway to reduce a staggering $2.5 billion debt owed to power producers. Meanwhile, regional leaders have met up under the West African Gas Pipeline Committee to accelerate energy under the West African Gas Pipeline Committee to accelerate energy collaboration. And in Liberia, political tensions continue to simmer there following the resignation of House Speaker Fonati Kofa. And also there's been a symbolic victory for heritage in Benin, which has received the return of a royal chair looted more than a century ago that was held in Finland. To help us unpack what these stories mean, we're now joined by, as I said, political scientist and international risk expert, Dr. David Matsanga. Always good to talk to you, Dr. Matsanga. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, my brother. How are you?
Always good, Dr. Matsanga. So let's start in Ghana. The government there is working to reduce this staggering $2.5 billion in debt owed to power producers. How did this debt accumulate to such an amount, and what impact has it had on the energy sector and the economy?
First of all, it is very sad. I don't know whether you are hearing me.
Yes, I can hear you, Dr. Matsanga.
First of all, it's very sad for a country like Ghana to reach such a status. A country that has struggled so much not to go under. You remember Ghana had a very bad record with IMF. It had a bad record with World Bank. It almost reached a point of no return. And it shows to you that most of the African countries are vulnerable. They are vulnerable to problems that are coming to destroy the same Africa. So if this is what is going to happen, then we must all be prepared across Africa that some things could work in a way that we don't want at all. Hello?
We can hear you now, Dr. Matsanga. All right.
Are you hearing me
yes,
now?
Yes, I can hear you. I just wonder if there are credible steps in place to actually fix this problem and meet this year-end repayment goal, or is this more political posturing ahead of elections?
I think it was. Every president in Africa tries to give his own manifesto. And that manifesto gave a lot of President Mahama, a lot of powers, a lot of persuasive language to win an election. But after elections, it is very rare for any government to deliver upon its own manifesto pledges. So I think it is going to happen. They are trying to find out how they can come out of this fix, because the people are really very eager to have their manifesto, to have their pledges fulfilled.
So West African nations recently convened under the West African Gas Pipeline Committee. Do we know what the main outcomes of this meetings were? And what can they do collectively, do you think?
I think what we can do is what Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali have decided to do. All these gas pipes, all these gas natural resources on the West African coast are manipulated by one country, one company. You know, wherever you see such things like a gas, you smell Total oil. You are smelling Total oil from very far, and yet it's very near. So we have that problem there, my brother. It is one of the biggest problems that Africa is facing today. It faces these challenges, and these challenges are the ones that have brought our continent to where it is and to the level of having difficulties in fighting neocolonialism that keeps on coming through the ventilators, through the windows, and it is with us. But their resolution was, how do they come together and harness this type of venture so that it doesn't bring me more difficulties? You are aware that all these things around the Delta State, you and I have done a lot on the Delta States, the commotion there, the killings there, the fighting there, the banditry there. Around that coast, there is quite a lot that must they discuss on that day.
Turning our attention to West Africa, to Benin, a royal chair that was looted during colonial times has been returned by Finland. I wonder what you see as the significance of this specific artifact for Benin.
Let me tell you, Peter, Finland is also now becoming one of the aggressors in West African politics. Finland has been very quiet, but of late Finland has taken a very serious capitalistic approach. You are aware that Finland is already encroached into Cameroon. Now, this artifact they are bringing was ours. But one of the problems that we have is that when they bring these artifacts, they bring it with conditions. Yet they took it without conditions. And this is one of the things that African countries must wake up and stand and say, enough is enough. Why do you bring it with conditions when you took it out without conditions? And it is yet is ours. We've lost millions and millions of dollars out of this. If we had it, we can even put it on any stock exchange, have loans out of it. People come and see it. Finland is one of the countries. If you can read the story of why they are chasing oil and gas in West Africa and Cameroon against the human rights, you cannot believe it, Peter.
Are we going to see more and more European countries, do you think, returning artifacts such as these? And some of them are probably in private hands and we may never see them.
Yes, we are going to see them. Some of them are going to hide them. You remember there was one country that brought Ghana. It gave Ghana conditions. It was Britain. Say you have to see it for a short time and return it. How? Look, Peter, this should not be allowed. Africans should not allow this. Africans should say no, enough is enough. If you are returning these artifacts, return them, give them to us. They are ours. You see, it is another story developing, Peter, which we must be very careful about. It links up to the story of the land reform, of which you and I, we found each other almost at blows. You have forgotten that story. It was a very good experiment of Mugabe saying, this is our land. And then they said, whose land was it? It was ours. We go out. This type of return on conditions is not very good. If they have returned, some are going to start running. Many Africans are going to start demanding these artifacts that were stolen, taken forcibly from the chiefs. And now they are traceable. And that is very good for the archaeologists who have done all this to make sure that they are traceable where they went.
All right, let's go to Liberia now, where Fonati Kofa has resigned as Speaker after months of legal and political wrangling there. What led to his resignation, and what does this signal about internal divisions within Liberia's ruling establishment?
Liberia's ruling party has been, riddled with factions. And I think the current chairman, president, has not run the party properly. He's not like a leader, a collective leader, a leader who takes decisions from all sides. So it has put him into terrible confusion with parliamentarians, with infighting, not unlike Man Salif, who was one of the best people to run that country so far after the war. This man is even thinking of bringing, I think I was doing a program with your sister at the station there, and where we said, why do you bring a tribunal today when Liberia finished the war a long time ago? Why do you want a tribunal? Why do you want to create a new tribunal to look for what? Which we did not get. We got it through Taylor. Taylor is serving 53 years in Britain. Why do you now bring another, situation where you want people to start talking about something which ended a long time ago? You are going to open up the wounds. And those are the wounds now coming out to Peter through the parliament. Some people are not very happy with bills that have been brought to think about the war. The wound has healed. You want to open up the plaster when it is not completely healed. Let the wound heal. 50, 40 years to come, then you can talk about it as history.
All right. And then perhaps finally, Borno State, Nigeria, has been sadly an area where we've seen insurgency, Boko Haram and other militants. And we're seeing reports that 5 soldiers were killed on Tuesday at 2 army bases. You're a political risk, international risk expert. Why is Nigeria failing to deal with this insurgency? And will it escalate, or will they find a solution?
Peter, Nigeria is a country that makes me sad, and it will make you sad. This is not Nigeria that we saw and the leaders when you and I used to fly there as a veteran journalist. This is a country that has gone down completely in terms of rule of law. Every time you open television in Nigeria, my dear brother, there is a kidnap, 200, 300, 400, 10 people died. Dead. Nigeria has got a very huge army, but very useless army. It turns on hunting down civilians. The most of the army in Nigeria, Peter, has been turned on civilians of Biafran side on southeast to go and torture civilians there, instead of coming back, all of them in a united front to face Bono states, Maiduguri. All those northern parts of Nigeria are gone. They have been infiltrated by Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Boko Haram. We know who these owners of ISIS and Al-Qaeda are. Last week I told you, these are not very far. In East Africa, we know them. They wear uniforms that resemble a uniform of another country across the Red Sea, up in Qatar. Why haven't we apprehended these guys? Why haven't we told the leaders we want you to talk to us? Two, Nigeria should ask African Union, the United Nations, that this problem that they have in their state is beyond their means of their army to protect civilians. And in fact, everywhere, not only in that state, in every part of Nigeria, they are total kidnapped, they are herders with guns, where they came from. Nigeria has 20 million cows, but it has more problems than India that has got 300 million cows.
All right. Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. Dr. Matsanga, thank you so much. We've run out of time, sadly. Always great talking to you. Thanks so much indeed for your powerful contributions there. That's Dr. David Matsanga, who is an international risk expert and political analyst, unpacking the stories in West Africa for us that have been playing out. Right now, though, it's time for your news headlines with Nolitando Butelezi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
A court in Kenya has approved the extradition of a former Afghan MP to the United States, Zahir Kadir. The former deputy speaker of Afghanistan's parliament is wanted in New York on charges of drug trafficking and illegal possession of military-grade firearms. Zambia's foreign minister has warned diplomats against interfering in the country's affairs. This comes days after the U.S. ambassador raised concerns about the systematic theft of drugs donated to the southern African state. And the World Health Organization has warned that rising malnutrition rates in Gaza as a result of Israel's continued blockading of aid could have a lasting impact on an entire generation. I'll have details at the top of the hour.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Let's get our sports update now. Here is Fikile Lingwati with the details.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Good morning once again, guys. Let me start off with cricket news this hour. Proteas coach Shukri Conrad has slammed suggestions that his premier paceman Kagiso Rabada got off lightly after testing positive for cocaine earlier this year. Rabada served only 1 month suspension from April the 1st, being returned a urine sample containing benzoyl-codeine, a metabolite of cocaine, after the SA20 match between My Cape Town and Durban Super Giants on the 21st of January. The seemingly lenient sanction for the 29-year-old has drawn criticism from some quarters, but Conrad, who named Rabada in his 15-man squad for the World Test Championship final on Tuesday, says the rules were followed to the letter.
I've been engaging with KG ever since I've learnt about it. I don't know why it's an elephant in the room, because I'm just thankful that the process that was followed was in line with what the world standards are. So it's not for me or anybody else to question whether the process that was followed was the legitimate one. It was the legitimate one. And he served whatever ban or whatever the consequences were and whatever it was laid down by SAIDS and in line with what the World Anti-Doping Association authorities prescribed.
Rabada's captain, Themba Bavuma, also pledged his support and says they fully agree with the processes that were followed. The two have been close since coming up at the Lions together, and Bavuma says they also had a personal conversation regarding the matter.
Cage is obviously a close friend of mine. So I would have supported him as much as he needed me to. I'm not going to dive deep into our conversation as friends, but I think from a captaincy point of view, to reiterate the sentiments that the coach uttered earlier, we're happy at the process. That's past us now, and I think now it's more a focus on the individual, the human, making sure that he continues to get the support that he needs.
On to football news. Paris Saint-Germain's dynamic right-back Achraf Hakimi has clinched the Marc Vivien Foe Award, crowning him League One Standout African Player for the 2024-2025 season. The Moroccan star outshone Nantes' Moses Simon, Nice' Ivan Guessin, and Strasbourg's Habib Diarra to claim the prestigious honor, named after the late Cameroonian midfielder who tragically passed away in 2003. Hakimi played a pivotal role as PSG secured their record-extending 13th league title. His contributions also propelled the Parisians to the Champions League final, where they will face Inter Milan on the 31st of May. The versatile defender sealed his case with a crucial goal in PSG's 2-1 Champions League semi-final victory over Arsenal, showcasing his attacking flair from the right flank. And Mamelodi Sundowns coach Miguel Cardoso has insisted that his technical team deserve a lot more credit for the work done since arriving at Kloerkop 4 months ago. Cardoso, who only needs a point to guide the Brazilians to record 8th league title, refuted the notion that he'd taken over a well-oiled machine under his predecessor, Mangoba Mngqithi. Although the Portuguese mentor acknowledged Mngqithi's efforts in the 7 games before getting sacked, Cardoso felt his 16 wins in 19 Betway Premiership fixtures is not being appreciated.
Where the team was, but it's clear that the job that was done by my staff and myself and everybody together. So it's important that people recognize what we've been doing in this league. We took the team to a high level. The team is not only playing fantastically, but beating record after record after record. It's goals scored. It's goal that the team doesn't suffer. It's the points that the team scored. So I think it's wonderful, but still 2 matches to play. And my focus is in finishing the season in the right way.
For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Figile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine, weekdays 6 till 9.
We continue with our coverage of recent arrests of activists and journalists in Harare during Monday's mass stay-away and protest. Dr. Tadini Masaya, who's the Secretary for the Information and Media of the United Zimbabwe Alliance, an opposition party founded in March 2022.
Every Zimbabwean is entitled to expressing themselves, whether they're ZANU-PF or they belong to any other political party or they do not. So what Ndoro believes in his call did is within their rights. However, we also fully acknowledge that it is an internal fight, and as UZA, we did not participate in that internal fight. We are not going to be used as pawns as what happened in 2017 to usher in a different face for ZANU-PF. It does not matter who is the face of ZANU-PF. ZANU-PF is going to remain the same.
Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine.
Right, it's time for us to rise and shine to the world of business, commerce and economics. And on the desk this morning is Buntle Headbush. Good morning to you, Buntle.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
A very good morning to you, Peter, and good morning to our listeners. In our first look at the business news this morning, the International Monetary Fund says the escalation of fighting in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo has strained the Central African nation's public finances. M23 rebels have staged an unprecedented advance in Eastern Congo this year, triggering a fresh cycle of violence in a decades-long conflict. The region is rich in minerals, including tantalum and gold. The closure of revenue collection offices in M23-controlled regions, combined with measures to ease living costs by exempting basic food products from customs duties and value-added tax, have led to a revenue shortfall. Elevated security spending has also put pressure on the budget. The Angolan Finance Ministry says a loan to the country from JP Morgan, which was a subject of a $200 million margin call during a market sell-off caused by U.S. trade tariffs, cost just below 9%. Chanduko Ligege has more details.
The ministry is responding to comments from analysts that the margin call highlighted the growing costs heavily indebted African nations are facing as they increasingly resort to unconventional financing deals due to various factors limiting their access to international debt markets. This was less than what the country would have paid for conventional debt. The Southern African oil exporter entered the deal, which is known as a total return swap, in two tranches of $600 million and $400 million in December.
South Africa's Transport Minister Barbara Creecy is calling on potential investors to submit proposals for investment in the country's rail and port infrastructure. This forms part of efforts to rehabilitate and reform critical logistics systems. The ministry has launched an online platform aimed at engaging the private sector in partnerships to help address long-standing challenges in rail logistics, which have been cited as a barrier to economic growth. The minister addressed members of the media at the 2025 Africa Rail Conference in Johannesburg.
In order to make sure that future rail services are interoperative, that they facilitate economic development, and they are aligned to the overall developmental goals of government, we are developing this National Rail Master Plan.
Economist Andre Roux has attributed South Africa's high unemployment rate of 32.9% in the first quarter of 2025 to the poorly performing economy, amongst other things. Professor Roux says another contributory factor could be that some businesses are now resorting to using machinery and robotic methods instead of relying on manual labor. The latest unemployment figure indicated unemployment increased by 1 percentage point. Roux is an economist from the Stellenbosch School of Business. U.S. President Donald Trump and Saudi Arabian Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman have signed what is described as a strategic economic partnership in Riyadh and involves a $142 billion defense agreement. As part of the deal, the U.S. will provide state-of-the-art war-fighting equipment to Saudi Arabia, who will in turn invest $20 billion in artificial intelligence in the U.S. Trump is on the first leg of a major diplomatic 4-day tour to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE. The BBC's Sarah Smith has the details.
It was a purple rather than a red carpet that was rolled out for Donald Trump as he arrived in Saudi Arabia. Exactly the kind of VIP treatment he knows he's guaranteed in the Middle Eastern countries he's chosen to visit on his first official trip of his second term. The focus is on striking financial deals with some of the world's wealthiest nations. He's brought with him prominent American business leaders, including Elon Musk and Sam Altman of OpenAI, as well as some cabinet members. The conflict in Gaza will inevitably arise in discussions. It's one reason why Mr. Trump cannot persuade Saudi Arabia to normalize relations with Israel.
Now for our first look at the indicators this morning, $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 600. In Botswana, it's at 13 bula 46. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 305. And in Zambia, it's at 26 kwacha 48. The BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 reals 64. Russia 80 rubles 40, and in India it's at 85 rupees 8. China, the yen is 7 yen 20, and South Africa $1 is trading at 18 rand 30. $1 is trading at 75 pence to the British pound and 89 to the euro. Looking at our commodities, gold is trading at $3,232 and platinum at $988 per ounce this morning, while Brent crude oil is at $66.17 a barrel. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Bontle Hedbush.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Get the news, music, and lifestyle of Africa on Channel Africa. The African perspective. G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa.
6:15 Central African Time. Let's get into our G20 fact for this Wednesday, the 14th of May. Did you know that South Africa has proposed the establishment of a Cost of Capital Commission during its G20 presidency? This commission will deliver a comprehensive expert review on the issues impacting the cost of capital for developing economies, which could help address future debt sustainability issues and the related fiscal space challenges. And that's our G20 fact this morning.
G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa, championing Africa through solidarity, equality, and sustainability. Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Nigeria's Senate has passed 4 tax reform bills that are meant to reform the country's tax system, seen by some as a source of frustration. The country needs sustainable revenue, and the overhaul of the tax system is expected to increase revenue generation, improve tax compliance, and increase the ease of doing business in the country. To discuss this, was joined on the line by the Director for the Institute of Capital Market Studies at Nasarawa State University in Nigeria, Professor Uche Uwaleke. Kedu, Professor Adenma?
Thank you so much. Yes, how is South Africa this morning?
Great, thank you. I think we're going to have great weather today. I hope the same for you there in Nigeria.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Thank you. My pleasure being your guest this morning.
Awesome, and we appreciate your time. So let's start with what the main frustrations with Nigeria's tax system were, especially for taxpayers in the country.
Well, the tax system we have in Nigeria today can be described as archaic, outdated. You have tax laws in Nigeria that dates back as far back as 1930s. The Stamp Duties, for example, Stamp Duties Act, predates Nigeria's independence. And over the years, you would have a situation in which a number of governments, both particularly the state governments, including the federal governments, have introduced their taxes that have, become a burden on businesses. So the multiplicity of taxes has not helped the situation. So it is this situation that the new tax system is trying to correct, trying to streamline the multiplicity of taxes, trying to improve the ease of doing business. In Nigeria today, you have as many, a typical businessman, is confronted with as many as 60 different types of taxes and levies officially. And unofficially, it is put at over, 200. So these are the challenges that the new tax system, is seeking to address.
So how do these reforms to the various tax laws announced by Finance Minister Doris Uzoka Anite on Tuesday, how do they now address these inefficiencies?
Yes, first by attempting to consolidate them. You have, just as you rightly mentioned, 4 tax bills that have been passed by the, as a matter of fact, the 2 chambers of the National Assembly. What we are waiting for now is just the harmonization before the bills are sent to the president for assent. The omnibus bill, which is the Nigerian tax bill, is seeking to consolidate all these myriads of taxes that I talked about into one, and that way, streamline them, to make it easy for taxpayers to even know what to pay. A major principle of tax is certainty. That's one of the key principles. Convenience, simplicity. These are the canons or principles of tax. So it's important that the tax system is simple. It's important that taxpayers know what to pay. That is not the situation in Nigeria currently. So the new tax law is seeking to achieve this, make the tax system simple, while at the same time also seeking to improve the revenue base of the government. As you know, Nigeria depends so much on the unsustainable source of revenue. That's talking about oil. And you know what's happening to oil price today. Nigeria's 2025 budget is based on $75 per barrel, and today oil price has gone down to $66, $65 per barrel. So that is not that's affecting the fiscal projections. So it's important that Nigeria returns to a sustainable means of raising revenues, and that's part of what this tax new law is seeking to achieve. Plugging leakages here and there. One of the bills is the Nigerian Revenue Service Bill, which also seeks to centralize tax collection. Today, you have the Federal Inland Revenue Service collecting value-added tax. You also have the customs collecting import VAT. So when you have a number of agencies collecting the same tax, you have leakages. Okay, so the new tax law seeks to have a central collection point, which is the Nigerian Revenue Service, that will now replace the Federal Inland Revenue Service in Nigeria. So that will, as I said, improve collection efficiency, block leakages, and of course, also help to widen the tax, the tax base.
Let's talk about other introductions. President Bola Tinubu created the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms with the aim of addressing tax multiplicity, to curb revenue leakages, and for better coordination between the relevant tax authorities. What has this so far achieved in terms of contributing to better tax frameworks in Nigeria? Professor Uwaleke.
The presidential fiscal.
Yes.
Yes, the presidential fiscal policy on tax reforms was set up by the president, in 2023. Shortly after, he came into office. So the tax reform.
I think we've got a problem with our line, and we're going to try and see if we can drop the line and then call him back. That's Professor Uche Uwaleka, who is Director of the Institute of Capital Market Studies at Nasarawa State University in Nigeria. We're talking about Nigeria's Senate having passed 4 tax reform bills. Our previous question being a look back in terms of what's already been put in place, that Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms, and how that's achieved in contributions to better tax frameworks in Nigeria, if it has quite a lot being done there in terms of re-looking and reframing tax frameworks. We're going to try and get a hold of Professor again. Our lines were not so great. Let's see if we can do that after this.
Mix Vibration sur Channel Africa.
Nous allons accueillir sur ces current affairs, sports, business, music, and lifestyle. We deliver an engaging Pan-African audience ready to connect, invest, and act. Multi-award winning, internationally recognized, digitally accessible across the globe. When Africa speaks, the world listens, and Channel Africa makes sure of it. For business, for culture, for Africa. Partner with Channel Africa, because Africa's voice is the future. Africa is a story, a living, breathing, ever-evolving masterpiece. And for over 5 decades now, one voice has told it like no other. Channel Africa. More than just a broadcaster, Channel Africa is the pulse of the continent, African-led, African-run, and deeply rooted in its heritage. It's the only international station that speaks to Africa in its own voices: English, Kiswahili, Chinyanja, French, and Portuguese. The languages that unite 1 billion people. We have been there through every shift, every milestone, and every triumph. Not just reporting history, but shaping the conversations that define Africa's future. For brands, media planning, and advertisers, Channel Africa is more than just a platform. It's an opportunity. With 25 compelling shows covering current affairs, sports, business, music, and lifestyle, we deliver an engaging Pan-African audience ready to connect, invest, and act. Multi-award winning, internationally recognized, digitally accessible across the globe. When Africa speaks, the world listens, and Channel Africa makes sure of it. For business, for culture, for Africa, partner with Channel Africa, because Africa's voice is the future. Africa is a story, a living, breathing, ever-evolving masterpiece. And for over 5 decades now, one voice has told it like no other. Channel Africa. More than just a broadcaster, Channel Africa is the pulse of the continent, African-led, African-run, and deeply rooted in its heritage. .com or the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store. Or just command your phone to find SABC Plus on your phone and check out all this good stuff. And that's where you will find Channel Africa, the African perspective. Oh yes, this is fresh and easy. Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Professor Uche Uwaleke joining us again, Director of the Institute of Capital Market Studies at Nasarawa State University in Nigeria, continuing that chat on tax reforms in the country that have been passed by Nigeria's Senate. Thanks for your patience, Professor. Our lines were not coming to party with us, but let's talk back on that point then, as you were on it. The Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms. How is this so far achieved in terms of making contributions to better tax frameworks in Nigeria?
Yes, thank you so much once again. Of course, you know what we have, the bills we have in the National Assembly, before the National Assembly today, represents a product of the efforts of the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms. So it is the work of the committee that was sent to the National Assembly for consideration. So the committee's work actually goes beyond tax, is the entire spectrum of fiscal policy. That's why the committee also made recommendations with respect to, how money's raised should be spending, because in Nigeria, one of the challenges we have in Nigeria today has to do with, if you like, you can call it the trust deficit. Mm-hmm. You know, the people don't trust the government. People don't trust that if they pay taxes, the money will be properly applied. So there's also a recommendation on how the money should be well applied. There is a recommendation with respect to budget reforms. There's also a recommendation in terms of even public borrowing, public debt, ensuring that the country's debt is sustainable. Now, let me also mention that one of the major things the committee has done also has to do with reforming the value-added tax. The committee recommended, there was a recommendation to increase the value-added tax from 7.5% to 15% by the year 2030. Of course, a phased increase, but that's, of course, witnessed a lot of opposition. Just as you had in South Africa recently, South Africa's, VAT at 15%. Recently, there was an attempt to increase it to 16%. Again, because of the position, it was, that plan was shelved. We also experienced that in Nigeria. But of course, in the case of Nigeria, that recommendation stemmed from the fact that the VAT rate in Nigeria is among the least in Africa. If you look at other countries in Africa, in Ghana, for example, value-added tax, standard value-added tax is also 15%. In Egypt, about that, I think 14%. So Nigeria is having the least. On the basis of that, there was a recommendation to increase it, but of course that didn't fly because of the massive opposition. But again, there was also a recommendation to reduce the company's income tax rate because Nigeria is also having one of the highest companies' income tax rates. The idea is to shift the emphasis from direct tax to indirect tax. Okay, Nigeria's companies' income tax today for large companies is 30%. Of course, in other countries, in South Africa, for example, it is 27%. In Ghana, you have 25%. In Egypt, 22.5%. So there was an attempt to also reduce that of Nigeria to 25%.
And that will speak to the ease of doing business as well in the country. We are completely out of time, Professor. Thanks so much for your insights. Very much appreciated on Rise and Shine this morning.
Yes, of course it will. The new tax law will absolutely, go a long way to improve the ease of doing business, improve Nigeria's ranking on the ease of doing business.
Right.
If you look at the ease of doing business, ranking, Nigeria is, down the ranks of the ladder, partly because of the difficulties businesses, face in paying taxes. So by the time all these multiple taxes are streamlined, it will go a long way to improve ease of doing business, improve confidence, and also stimulate production, in the country.
Thanks. Professor Uche Uwaleke is Director of the Institute of Capital Market Studies at Nasarawa State University in Nigeria. Appreciating him giving us those insights. It's 7:01 as we enter the next and second hour of Africa Rise and Shine. A very good morning to you from me, Asanda, Beda, and Peter Ndoro, but also good morning to Nolutando Butelezi with our news update, and then Fikile Lingwati will follow with sports headlines.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thanks, Asanda, and good morning. Mali's military government has announced that it had dissolved all political parties, approving a recommendation publicized last month, which spurred unprecedented protests in the capital, Bamako. A statement read on state television said that the decision had been validated by military leader Assimi Goïta, who seized power in the West African country after coups in 2020 and 2021. Last month, a national conference on political actors in Mali recommended naming Goïta as president with a 5-year mandate, as well as dissolving the parties. A senior Democrat who serves on the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee says it's baffling as to why the Trump administration is admitting South Africa's white Afrikaners for resettlement while continuing to indefinite suspension for thousands of other legitimate asylum seekers who have fled persecution. Senator Jean Shaheen released a statement pointing to what she called a United Nations finding that no South Africans were eligible for refugee status. Sherwin Bryce Pierce reports.
Bishop Sean Rowe writes that the church would not help with the resettlement of the newly arrived white South Africans, arguing that it was painful to watch one group of refugees selected in a highly unusual manner receive preferential treatment over many others who had been waiting in refugee camps or dangerous conditions for years. The church will now end its decades-long refugee resettlement partnership with the federal government, while Senator Jean Shaheen described the admission of Afrikaners in front of others in line as a clearly politically motivated decision and an effort to rewrite history. She called on the administration to clarify why the group qualified for resettlement and why they were prioritized over others, including Afghans and Sudanese who have fled their homes due to conflict and persecution.
A court in Kenya has approved the extradition of a former Afghan MP to the United States. Zahir Kadir, the former deputy speaker of Afghanistan's parliament, is wanted in New York on charges of drug trafficking and illegal possession of military-grade firearms. The BBC's Akisa Wandera has the details.
Once a significant figure in Afghanistan, Kadir now finds himself at the center of an extradition battle. Kenyan authorities, acting on a request from the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, detained him based on an arrest warrant issued in the United States in March. Kadir has denied the charges of narcotics importation conspiracy and possession of machine guns. He says the case is politically motivated. His lawyer said the court ignored key defense points and will appeal the ruling.
Zambia's foreign minister has warned that diplomats against interfering in the country's affairs. This comes days after the U.S. ambassador raised concerns about the systematic theft of drugs donated to the southern African state. Mulambo Hayimbe said that there is an increasing tendency by envoys to ignore diplomatic channels, and this could undermine the spirit of mutual respect. Last week, Gonzalez called a press conference to announce that the U.S. was cutting $50 million of health aid to Zambia because of the theft of life-saving medications that the U.S. had provided for patients. In his response, Hayimbe said that they're addressing the government through the media amounted to interference and was in breach of diplomatic conventions. The World Health Organization has warned that rising malnutrition rates in Gaza as a result of Israel's continued blockading of aid could have a lasting impact on an entire generation. The organization says that the lack of food could result in stunted growth and impaired cognitive development. The BBC's Wire Davies has the details.
According to Gaza's health ministry, at least 31 people were killed in the latest Israeli airstrikes. Among the targets was the Nasser hospital in Khan Yunis. The Israeli army later acknowledged it had targeted the hospital from where it said Hamas was operating a command and control centre. Israel has vowed to carry out a new military push to control and hold much of Gaza, forcing hundreds of thousands of internal refugees to move once again. An Israeli blockade has prevented any food, fuel or medicines being allowed into Gaza for over 70 days.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I am Nolutando Butelezi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In our sports headline, Pakistan has confirmed the appointment of Mike Hassan as a new white ball head coach. Paris Saint-Germain's dynamic right back has been crowned standout African player for the 2024-2025 season. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Start your day informed, inspired, and entertained. Asanda and Peter bring you Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time.
Black South Africans are the largest group that suffers unemployment among all other population groups. That's according to the latest government data that shows that unemployment among Black South Africans remains above the country's very high unemployment rate. In the first 3 months of this year, the unemployment level increased by 1 percentage point to 32.9% in the workforce. Dimakadzo Lishoro has details.
Despite claims by somewhat South Africans of economic exclusion and hardships because of policies like affirmative action and employment equity that they say favor the Black African population in South Africa, this group remains the most affected by unemployment. At 81% of the country's population, Black South Africans constitute the biggest population group, yet their unemployment rate exceeds the national unemployment average, and Black women are the most vulnerable when it comes to joblessness. The head of South Africa's Stats Agency, Risenga Maluleke, says the jobless rate among Black women is 39%.
The Black African population group is the only one that has an unemployment rate higher than the national average. When we unpack in terms of male-female, we can see Black African females are sitting with the highest unemployment rate, sitting at 39.8%. We can see that the colored females are sitting at 24%. The Indian Asian females are sitting at 17.3% unemployment rate. And the white population group, the females are sitting at 8.6% unemployment rate.
He says the smallest population groups, that is whites and Indians, have the most jobs in South Africa.
The whites have the lowest unemployment rate, meaning that those that are employed are relatively more when you look at the white population group alone. The Indian Asians come with an unemployment rate of about 13.3%, yet they are the smallest. And then when you go to the colored population group, sitting at about 22%, 24% at any given point. And they are the second largest population group in South Africa. Then when you go to the Black Africans, their unemployment rate is always higher than national average at 37%. So what it would tell you when you look at population groups is that your majority, as in your Black Africans, are affected the most by unemployment compared to the other population groups.
The country's unemployment rate picked up in the first quarter of 2025, meaning most young people who came out of the schooling system last year who weren't looking for a job in the first 3 months of this year could not find a job. Even though joblessness among graduates has crept up, it remains the lowest when compared to young people without basic education. Maluleke says having a matric alone is no longer a guarantee to securing a job. The level of youth who are neither employed nor in education is a growing crisis.
We have 10.3 million young people aged 15 to 24 years in South Africa. Of those, 3.8 million are not in employment, education, or training, retaining a need rate of 37.1%. I'm about 7.5 years in my job as statistician general. It's the first time I've seen the number of young people not in employment, education, or training reaching 3.8 million.
This does not bode well for efforts by the government to create employment amid an economy that has not been able to grow above an average of 2% over the last decade. The International Monetary Fund recently slashed South Africa's economic growth forecast for 2025, given the uncertainty around the government of national unity and the unilateral tariffs imposed on the country's exports to the US, including a 25% hit to car exports. Senior economist at First National Bank, Tanda Sitole, says this data reflects the subdued economy.
The outlook remains challenging amid global uncertainty, but ongoing structural reforms like Operation Vulindlela 2.0 could support job creation in the medium term.
The trade, construction, government, mining and private household sectors shared jobs, while the finance and transport industries were among those that created jobs. Formal employment was on the decline, while the informal sector created 17,000 jobs in the 3 months to March. Sitole says this data underscores the urgent need to accelerate pro-growth structural reforms to drive sustainable and inclusive economic expansion. For Channel Africa News, I'm Dimakazo Leshoro in Johannesburg.
Modernizing existing rail networks, expanding into rural and underserved regions, securing multilateral funding or regional projects, and unlocking opportunities for local SMMEs in the rail supply chain. Now, these are just some of the key topics that are under discussion at the Africa Rail Conference that's currently underway in Johannesburg, South Africa. The event has drawn over 150 speakers, 5,000 attendees, and 500 guest buyers. Channel Africa business reporter Innocent Samosa has more.
The Africa Rail Conference is currently underway in Johannesburg, South Africa, bringing together rail industry leaders, government officials and private sector players from across the continent. South Africa's Minister of Transport, Barbara Creecy, underscored the importance of public-private partnerships to tackle the issues of funding and investment.
What we want to understand is the nature of market appetite before we issue requests for proposals, because in the past we have seen a situation where Transnet has issued requests for proposals from private sector partners that have been unresponsive. So we want to understand what is the market appetite like so that these requests for proposals can respond to market sentiment. I must say that this is not going to create a free-for-all, and that's why we are also creating the private sector participation unit under the auspices of the DBSA.
But what progress has been made in modernizing Africa's rail infrastructure over the past years? Ochi Williams is the director of INON Africa.
All right, so if we just look at our home base here in South Africa, there's been quite a lot of movements in the last few years. I mean, just yesterday I visited the Transnet Freight Rail team and had a look at the Kudusport plant and the various innovations that they're busy with. And they've done a lot to claw back on the losses that we've incurred, like I say, in the last five to 6 or so years. They're pulling us back into the positive, if I can say, in terms of the balance sheet, so that's great. And naturally looking to position the country as a key exporter of obviously finished products, but also those minerals that the rest of the world is so looking after, or essentially trying to make sure that they've got enough supply going forward for the various technologies and the different innovations that they want to put in place.
Webster Gozo, executive of human capital at Trans Namibia Holdings, says harmonization of rail standards across the continent can positively impact the African Continental Free Trade Area.
If it is that we're going to come together and allow people and goods and services to move over each and every single country with no borders, no customs duties and all of those things, we'll start to look ourselves as an African continent, as Africans, rather than the same way as you do when you get into Europe. Sometimes if you get into Europe, you get into a train in France, you can land up in Spain, you can land up to Italy without even having stopped anywhere. You wouldn't even know you're not there unless somebody has actually told you. This is the same way we need to start to think in this country, rather than looking at ourselves as the other when we're only talking about our neighbors. And therein lies the opportunity for all of us.
For Channel Africa News, I am Innocent Simosa at the 2025 Africa Rail Conference in Johannesburg.
Africa in Song with Chanduko Ligege.
So the artist that I just played now went by the name A.B. Crystal. So A standing for Alfred, B for Benjamin. What's your take on people having two names? Is it because maybe you can't decide on a name?
I've heard people saying that they are named because of whatever that was happening around.
These are also seasonal. I'm sure now a baby born in the Eastern Cape is called Nama Tarif.
You see now? Or it was a born baby when it was, what do you call these things we used to pay for men driving?
Nama Itol.
Nama Itol, listen.
Well, Loma Confident is leaving.
Africa in Song with Chanduko Ligege. A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
During a media briefing on South Africa's G20 summit preparations held in Pretoria on Monday, South Africa's Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Ronald Lamola, confirmed that all G20 member states, including their heads of state, have been invited to attend the upcoming Leaders Summit in Johannesburg. He noted that while former U.S. President Joe Biden has been invited, it will be up to the U.S. government to confirm his attendance. On Russia's participation, Lamola indicated that in line with recent President Vladimir Putin is not expected to attend due to the International Criminal Court's ruling, with Russia likely to be represented at a ministerial level, as it was during the Brazil summit. Channel Africa's reporter Michael Mbewe has more.
Amid hostile tensions between South Africa and the U.S., skepticism is rife to whether U.S. President Donald Trump will make his way to South Africa to take part in the G20 Summit of Leaders to be held in South Africa in November 2025. With public pressure mounting, Lamola poured cold water on the subject.
With regards to the Leaders Summit, who has been invited to participate, the G20 is for all members of the G20. And the leaders of the G20, they are all expected or they are invited to attend. And obviously, the U.S. President, as a member state of the G20, will be invited. but it's up to the US whether they attend or not the G20 in South Africa in the Leaders Summit. So as to whether the US President will attend the Leaders Summit in Johannesburg, we will leave it to the US government to confirm his attendance or his non-attendance.
Lamola also cleared the air on Russia's president participation.
With regards to the president of Russia, you will remember that he didn't attend the Brazil summit. Russia was represented by the Minister of Foreign Affairs in Brazil, and I think also in the previous one. So we will want to continue in that context, and there were reasons at that level at that time. So we are looking forward to continue in that context, but Russia will participate and be represented in the Leaders Summit.
The G20 project coordinator, Masoja Nguni, who is tasked with overall project management of Sherpa meetings, provided the following account.
Firstly, just to underscore that the US is part of the G20 Troika, comprised of Brazil as the previous president, South Africa, the current president, and the US, which is the incoming G20 president next year. So there is a dynamic cooperation within the Troika on the organization of work. In actual fact, the first in-person G20 Troika at Sherpa level took place in Washington, D.C. In April.
On U.S. participation, Nguni says the U.S. is actively taking part in all key G20 meetings.
Regarding the participation of the U.S. in the working group of the G20, there are 15 working groups in total, and of course the U.S. does participate in these meetings. Of course, there may be issues in some of the working groups that they may feel strongly about, but that does not in any way hinder their participation and also the contribution that they make in these meetings.
Michael Mbewe, Channel Africa News, Johannesburg.
Je, una jambo lolote akilini mwako? Je, una shauku kuhusu masuala muhimu? Na je, una maoni ambayo unataka yasikike? Kweli, hili jukwaa ni la kwako. Piga simu au tuandikie kwenda WhatsApp namba alama ya kujumulisha 2760552594 na tutakupigia simu.
Mtangazaji wa habari zetu za Afrika Kusini mjini Johannesburg.
Hivyo unaweza kuwa mshirika kwenye matangazo yetu. Sio mazungumzo tu, ni fursa yako ya kuchangia maoni yako na kushirikiana na jumuiya ya wasikilizaji wanaotamani mtazamo wako. Tufuate kwenye mitandao ya kijamii. Tembelea tovuti yetu www.channelafrica.co.za na uwe tayari kushiriki na kuchangia maoni yako kwenye Channel Africa. Channel Africa, mtazamo wa Kiafrika.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
In a recent High Court ruling in South Africa involving $164 million debt, the court confirmed that the South African Revenue Service, or SARS, which is the country's tax collecting authority, has the legal right to go after third parties, that includes company directors or financial managers, for unpaid tax debts, to freeze their assets and even to stop them from leaving the country if necessary. To talk to us on this and its implications, we're joined on the line by the director in the Tax and Exchange Control Practice at law firm Cliff Decker Hofmeyer, Heinrich Low. Heinrich, thank you for joining us. How are you on this Wednesday?
Hi, good morning. I'm very well, thanks, and you?
Thank you, and thanks for making time for us. Let's start with background briefly in terms of this case and how it ended up in court and what the implications of it are.
Yeah, sure. So it's more of a legal question that was asked. It's not so much about the relevant facts, but let me just give you some context. So we have a piece of legislation in South Africa. It's called the Tax Administration Act, and it's been in operation for over a decade now. And it contains various provisions in terms of which SARS can hold individuals personally liable for the tax debts of others, including companies. And there had been some debate in the past as to the constitutionality of some of these sections. So, for example, one of the sections is Section 180 of the Tax Administration Act, which provides that if you are involved or in control of the financial management of a company and you act negligently or fraudulently, and that negligence or fraud causes a company, for example, not to pay its tax debts, then SARS can make a decision to hold that individual personally liable. And once it does so, then all of SARS's collection powers that it may have had against the company becomes available to it also against that individual. What's important to note here is that this process generally does not involve a court process or any court oversight. This is more or less a unilateral decision that's made by SARS. Now, they do have to give you a right to make representations, but for example, if they dismiss your representations, then all of their collection powers simply become available to them, and then it would be up to the individual to actually approach a court to perhaps have that decision reviewed. And so the constitutionality of this particular section was up for debate in this particular court process. And the court found that it was in fact constitutional, and it did not deprive the individual, for example, from the right to access courts. It is constitutional, and it is within the framework balanced.
Okay, so there must be a fair process on the part of SARS, and also anyone affected can challenge the decision. Does this case then speak to how the law is trying to balance between individual rights and the country's need to collect revenue?
Yes, it certainly does. And I think the court did a good job of, let's say, justifying the constitutionality of these sections. An individual obviously has a whole bunch of constitutional rights, the right to property, the right to freedom of movement, the right to trade, and of course the right to fair and just administrative action, and the right to access to courts. And the court found that this particular legislation does not completely deprive an individual of these rights. In fact, there are lots of checks and balances in place. An individual can still approach a court. And in respect of some of the other findings, for example, restriction on travel and an order of repatriation of foreign assets, the court also found that those are not unconstitutional, and you have to balance the importance with tax collection against some of these other rights that an individual might have.
What does this mean for those who are in charge of companies' finances but are not necessarily company directors?
Well, this particular section 180 can also apply to senior financial managers or anybody who is regularly involved in the financial management of a company. And what it means is that such individuals need to be very, very careful when they deal with the financial affairs and specifically the tax affairs of a company, in terms of paying tax debts, etc., because they can, under certain circumstances, be held liable, especially if they make a mistake or are negligent. They need to be very careful and uphold a high standard of care. And this court judgment means that they will not have the argument available to them that these sections are unconstitutional. They would have to approach a court and perhaps then show that they were not acting fraudulently or not acting negligently.
What about crypto-generated income? How does this fit in additional tax assessments for taxpayers and those who might want to evade tax? And what penalties there could be involved as well?
Sure. So that's somewhat of a different topic from this particular case, but yes, in recent years, I think the South African Revenue Services have made it very clear that crypto-based income is definitely taxable. It must be included in income. This case may perhaps be relevant to the extent that these kind of assets are held offshore. It's quite clear that SARS has the right in terms of the Tax Administration Act to approach a court for a repatriation order, and such assets may have to be repatriated to South Africa should SARS obtain such an order.
Okay, so it will definitely be a deterrent to companies that want to evade tax. But how much of this move to focus on those who dodge or might want to dodge tax can we attribute to Treasury's cancellation of that controversial 0.5% VAT increase in terms of how that could have left a fiscal deficit behind?
Sure. I think the cancellation of the increase in the VAT rate has several, let's say, complicated outcomes. But I think, firstly, just maybe some of the confusion that has been created in the wake may, to some extent, be a little bit demoralizing to a lot of taxpayers. But it is now clear that there won't be such a VAT hike. And yes, it may very well be that there will be shortcomings or maybe some difficulty in reaching all of the relevant goals. But yes, there are definitely some concerns that are attached to it.
Okay, let's leave it there for today. And thanks again for joining us here on Channel Africa.
Thank you very much. Have a good morning.
Thanks. Henry Kholo speaking to us on the line there. He's director in the Tax and Exchange Control Practice at law firm Cliff Decker Hofmeyer. 7:30 Central African time it is. Let's say good morning for news headlines. Here's Nolutando Buthelezi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Mali's military government has announced that it had dissolved all political parties, approving a recommendation publicized last month, which spurred unprecedented protests in the capital, Bamako. A senior Democrat who serves on the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee says that it's baffling as to why the Trump administration is admitting South Africa's white Afrikaners for resettlement, while continuing to indefinite suspend for thousands of other illegitimate asylum seekers. And United Nations aid chief Tom Fletcher has condemned Israel's plan for aid distribution in Gaza. He says it's a cynical slideshow and a deliberate distraction from continued violence. I'll have the details at the top of the hour.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
It's time to take a look at sports, and always up to date and keeping us in the know is Fikile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
And in this hour, we bet off with cricket news. Pakistan have appointed Mike Hassan as their new coach for all short formats, replacing Aqib Javed, who was in an interim role for the last 5 months. Gary Keston abruptly resigned 6 months into a 2-year contract as head coach when Javed took over the reins on a temporary basis. Hassan enjoyed a fruitful time, 6 years as head coach of New Zealand, when he was appointed in 2012, with the Black Caps becoming a force in world cricket, including reaching their first World Cup final in 2015, where they lost to Australia. Hassan is currently the coach of Pakistan Super League, the PSL outfit, Islamabad United, and will start his tenure with the national side at the conclusion of the T20 franchise tournament. And Proteas coach Shukri Conrad has slammed suggestions that his premier paceman, Kagiso Rabada, got off lightly after testing positive for cocaine earlier this year. Rabada served only 1 month suspension from April the 1st, having returned a urine sample containing benzoylecognin, a metabolite of cocaine, after the SA20 match between My Cape Town and Durban Super Giants on the 21st of January. The seemingly lenient sanction for the 29-year-old has drawn criticism from some quarters, but Conrad, who named Rabada in his 15-man squad for the World Test Championship final on Tuesday, says the rules were followed to the letter.
I've been engaging with KG ever since I don't know why it's an elephant in the room, because I'm just thankful that the process that was followed was in line with what the world standards are. So it's not for me or anybody else to question whether the process that was followed was the legitimate one. It was the legitimate one. And he served whatever ban or whatever the consequences were and whatever it was laid down by SAIDS and in line with what the World Anti-Doping Association authorities prescribes.
Rabada's captain Themba Bavuma also pledged his support and says they fully agree with the processes that were followed. The two have been close since coming up at the Lions together, and Bavuma says they also had a personal conversation regarding the matter.
Cage is obviously a close friend of mine, so I would have supported him as much as he needed me to. I'm not going to dive deep into our conversation as friends, but I think from a captaincy point of view, to reiterate the sentiments that the coach uttered earlier, we're happy at the process. That's past us now, and I think now it's more a focus on the individual, the human, making sure that he continues to get the support that he needs.
On to football news. Paris Saint-Germain's dynamic right-back Achraf Hakimi has clinched the Marc Vivien Foe Award, crowning him League One Standout African Player for the 2024-2025 season. The Moroccan star outshone Nantes' Moses Simon, Nice' Ivan Gusan, and Strasbourg's Habib Diarra to claim the prestigious honor, named after the late Cameroonian midfielder who tragically passed away in 2003. Hakimi played a pivotal role as PSG secured the record-extending 13th League One title. His contributions also propelled the Parisians to the Champions League final, where they will face Inter Milan on the 31st of May. The versatile defender sealed his case with a crucial goal in PSG's 2-1 Champions League semi-final victory over Arsenal, showcasing his attacking flair from the right flank. And finally, tennis news. The world number one Jannik Sinner came through the first true test of his comeback from a doping ban with straight sets win over Francesco Cerundolo, which took him into the Italian Open quarterfinals. Italian Sinner bested 17th seed Cerundolo 7-6, 7-2 tie, 6-3 in a match which was delayed by a couple of hours due to a torrential downpour to set up a last 8 clash with either Casper Ruud or Jaume Munar. For any sports stories you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fide Lungwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Zilipendwa na I am Henry Shekif.
Baiter, mambo vipi?
Poa.
Mwaka 2025 mpaka hivi sasa ukoje kwa upande wako mzee baba?
Kabisa, kwa sababu tumejiandaa vizuri. Kama mwaka jana tumefunga vizuri na Septemba, mwaka huu tumefungua vizuri na
hatari sana. Mzee umejipanga, utaki kutupumzisha?
Maana mwanzo alikuwa analalamika sana, you spend long time without releasing songs blah blah. Now I need to
back to back. Platform, mambo vipi?
Mambo poa kabisa, wanasemaje huko ese?
Yani huku kuna shangwe, yani la kufa mtu, sikwambie mtu babu.
Hii ni marangu ya kwanza pia kusikika kwa pande hizo za South Africa.
Karibu sana, unajisikiaje?
Well, na furaha kubwa sana kwa sababu ni marangu ya kwanza, na I hope watu watakuwa wananisikiliza, watu wengi pia. Ili uweze kuvuka nje, watu waweze kukufahamu, tuseme West hivi na nchi tofauti, ni lazima pia uanze kufanya vizuri hapa nyumbani, then uvuke East Africa. After East Africa,
Zilipendwa hapa kwenye Channel Africa, taswira ya Afrika.
Let's find out what's happening from the world of business. Here's the latest with Buntle Headbush.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thanks, Asanda, and a very good morning to our listeners. South Africa's Electricity and Energy Minister, Ndoro will this morning update the media in Pretoria on the status of South Africa's electricity generation performance. This after power utility Eskom's announcement yesterday that it would implement Stage 2 rolling blackouts during evening peak periods. Energy and Electricity spokesperson, Tsakane
The Minister of Electricity and Energy, Dr. Ndoro,
will provide a comprehensive update on South Africa's electricity generation performance. This follows Eskom's implementation of Stage 2 load shedding due to capacity challenges. These include delays in returning generation units from maintenance, impacting our power supply.
Economist Andre Roux has attributed South Africa's high unemployment rate of 32.9% in the first quarter of 2025 to the poorly performing economy, among other things. Professor Roux says another contributory factor could be that some businesses are now resorting to using machinery and robotic methods instead of relying on manual labor. The latest unemployment figure indicated unemployment increased by 1 percentage point. Roux is an economist from the Stellenbosch School of Business. The Cobalt Institute says demand for cobalt will rise faster than supply in the coming years. This will allow the market to reduce the surplus and swing to a deficit by the early 2030s. The Institute says that in the short term, the future of the cobalt market depends on what the Democratic Republic of Congo, the world's top producer of the mineral used to make lithium-ion batteries, decides to do after its 4-month export ban imposed in late February. Meanwhile, the DRC's Mines Minister Kizito Pakabomba says the country's 4-month ban on cobalt exports is under review. He made the announcement at a cobalt industry conference in Singapore today without giving any further details. The country imposed a ban on battery metals in February this year to control the oversupply in the international market. Moving further afield, U.S. President Donald Trump has made a number of announcements in Saudi Arabia, his first stop on his tour of the Middle East. He was speaking after a lunch that the Saudi Prince Mohammed bin Salman hosted. Trump says the two have signed commercial agreements worth more than $600 billion, or nearly 11 trillion rand. Trump's announcement included this message to Iran.
If I can make a deal with Iran, I'll be very happy if we're going to make your region and the world a safer place. But if Iran's leadership rejects this olive branch and continues to attack their neighbors, then we will have no choice but to inflict massive maximum pressure, drive Iranian oil exports to zero, and take all action required to stop the regime from ever having a nuclear weapon. Iran will never have a nuclear weapon.
Now for a look at our indicators this morning, $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 600. In Botswana, it's at 13 bula 46. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 305. And in Zambia, it's at 26 kwacha 48. The BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 real 64. Russia is 80 rubles 40. India, 85 rupees 8. China, 7 yuan 20. And South Africa, $1 is trading at 18 rand 30 this morning. $1 is trading at 75 pence to the British pound and 89 to the euro. Taking a look at the commodities, gold is trading at $3,232 and platinum at $988 per ounce, while Brent crude oil is at $66.77 a barrel, 17 cents a barrel rather. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Buntle Headbush.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
One of Africa's biggest tourism events, Africa's Travel Indaba, has officially opened in Durban, KwaZulu-Natal. The exhibition, this is in South Africa. The exhibition floor was declared open by South Africa's Deputy President Paul Mashatile and Tourism Minister Patricia de Lille. The event brings together tourism ministers, businesses and buyers from across the continent and beyond. Channel Africa's Lebogang Mabange reports.
Ladies and gentlemen,
I would like to now officially declare Africa Travel Indaba 2025 open.
Africa's tourism sector is gathering momentum, with this year's Travel Indaba positioning the continent as a force in the global travel economy. Over 1,300 exhibitors and 1,200 buyers are participating, representing more than 55 countries. Minister of Tourism in South Africa, Patricia de Lille, says this turnout highlights Africa's readiness to lead and innovate in a highly competitive industry.
We are proud to announce all the 1,300 exhibitors, 1,200 buyers that are here from more than 55 countries, 27 African countries. So our collective presence here at the Travel Indaba signifies more than just market access. It signals Africa's readiness to lead, to innovate, and inspire the global tourism landscape.
De Lille also welcomed 3 new African countries to the platform, a sign of growing continental interest in this trade show.
We are especially excited to welcome 3 new countries from the continent that joined us for the first time here, from Chad, St. Helena, and Burkina Faso, whose presence here affirms the value of the growing Africa Travel Indaba, but also shows us this is a truly continental platform. And the tourism economy of tomorrow is African. It is diverse, it is youthful, it is green, it is digital.
Delivering the keynote address, South Africa's Deputy President Paul Mashatile highlighted the country's role in promoting inclusive, sustainable tourism, especially as the only African nation in the G20.
As the only African member of the G20, South Africa has a solemn responsibility and a proud opportunity to advocate for developing nations and the global south to champion sustainable tourism and to secure investment for Africa's future. Program Director, let us be clear, Africa's future lies in Africans choosing Africa. We must choose to explore each other's countries with curiosity and determination.
Mashatile also emphasized the need for policy reform and investment in infrastructure to make travel across the continent more seamless.
As we come together in discussions in this Indaba and reflect on many aspects of this Indaba, let us also think about meaningful strategies to enhance our infrastructure connectivity and visa systems to facilitate travel throughout the continent. We also need to invest more in skills and digital transformation for the tourism sector to thrive.
As Africa's tourism sector continues its recovery post-pandemic, events like the Travel Indaba serve as a critical platform for business networking, investment opportunities, and policy alignment. The focus this year is not just on selling destinations, but on building an African tourism economy that is self-sustaining, collaborative, and future-ready. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebogang Mabange in Durban, KwaZulu-Natal province of South Africa.
Start your day right with Channel Africa Breakfast.
That smells delicious.
Live, 5 days a week.
Okay, so terrorism, cyber threats, and geopolitical instability continue to pose serious challenges to global stability and economic resilience. This week, South Africa is playing host to a high-level international gathering aimed at tackling these issues head-on. The International Forum of Terrorism Risk Insurance Pools, or IFTRIP, IFTRIP, is holding its annual conference in Cape Town. The event brings together global experts from insurance markets, government, and risk management to explore how countries can better prepare for and recover from large-scale disruptive events. Well, to unpack what this means for South Africa and the continent more broadly, we're now joined by Mpumi Tiekwe, who's the CEO at Underwriting and Strategy at the South African Special Risks Insurance Association, SASRIA. Thanks very much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Thank you, Peter. It's a great pleasure, and good morning to your listeners as well.
Fantastic. So let's start with the forum itself. What's the primary aim of the conference, and why is it significant that South Africa is hosting it this year?
Well, I think first and foremost, what's critical about the conference this particular year, as you know, over the last 15 months or so, the world has about 50% of the world's population has had some form of elections. And the outcome of these elections have had a profound impact on the world and the way that the world is going to manage geopolitical risks. We've just had recent elections, for instance, in Canada. We had our own elections in May last year. And of course, the elections that were held in the US, and we've got now Trump just having finished his 100 days as the president of the US. So there are a lot of dynamics that are happening in the world that are having an impact on how terrorism risks in particular need to be managed. And what we are exploring here in Cape Town is how can, as the world bodies that ensure this particular risk, collaborate, share information, share skills, and come up with risk management strategies to manage the terrorism risk. The significance, of course, for South Africa and the continent as a whole is that South Africa, as you know, is hosting the G20 this particular year. So we've got about 13 countries represented in this in this particular conference. And for the continent, we are seeing a lot of terrorism activity, especially in Central Africa, West of Africa, and even in our doorsteps, in north of Mozambique, or the northern parts of Mozambique. So we're really looking at how can we respond to these particular threats and how can they impact South Africa, the continent, and the world.
So what exactly is a terrorism risk insurance pool, and how does SASRIA's model compare with similar mechanisms in other parts of the world?
Well, if you have to look at the birth or the genesis of SASRIA, SASRIA was formed post the 1976 civil unrest, and the government of the day, or the apartheid government at that time, saw the acts of freedom fighters as terrorist acts. And SASRIA was then created in 1979 to ensure risks or damages that occur due to, for example, if there was a bomb blast somewhere and it creates a damage to property, and for that particular business then to recover quickly. Private sector insurance generally all over the world do not want to insure terrorism risks. So the state had to intervene and provide this particular cover, which is what happened in 1979. SASRIA has then since evolved to not just providing terrorism cover. We cover, for example, things like civil unrest. If you recall the July 2021 incident in which SASRIA paid an amount of 32 billion rands of claims that emanated from that particular event. We also insure damages due to labor unrest as well, or service delivery protest. So that's how SASRIA has evolved post our democracy to cover risks that the private sector insurance companies are just not willing to insure. So as Sazria, we are learning from other companies that came before us. For instance, there is an insurer in Spain that was formed in 1949 that covers broader risk than what Sazria is doing. The Australian pool has extended its mandate from terrorism to include a cyclone cover. As Sazria, we're looking at how we can then expand our mandate and provide South Africans with better insurance that will cover them. For instance, the impact of climate change. So we are experiencing in areas like KwaZulu-Natal more flooding, and something that you said in your intro, Mr. Ndoro, which is cyber terrorism. For example, about 2 weeks ago, South African Airways was subject to a cyber act where their systems were hijacked and they were not fully operational. So we are finding these risks continuously emerging, and South Africa needs a vehicle to respond to these particular risks.
Who are some of the keynote speakers that you've got tabled, and what messages are you expecting?
Well, we've got a wide range of speakers. For instance, yesterday we had Dr. Wajaro. He comes from the Institute for Security Studies. He shared his expertise about how terrorism is financed in the rest of the continent. How do funds flow, between countries to fund terrorism? We've got various CEOs of the various pools in the industry from across the world. We've got bomb experts as well addressing us. But maybe from a South African perspective, earlier on today, we're going to have the Minister of Finance giving us a recorded a message. Unfortunately, as you know, he has to focus his mind on Budget 03, so he couldn't be present physically. And tomorrow, we've got our former Minister of International Relations, Dr. Naledi Pandor, who's going to speak about the impact the elections are having on the world and how the geopolitical relationships are shaping up.
That's quite an interesting array of speakers. I wonder, during a G20 year, South Africa currently chairing the G20, do you see any synergies between G20's goals on resilience and sustainability and the themes that are emerging from this forum?
Oh, of course, yes, definitely. I think really the key message, that the leaders of the world are realizing very, very fast is that, threats like this know no borders. They don't need a visa to go from one country to the next country. Just like we've experienced with things like a COVID or a pandemic or a virus. What the world needs more than ever is collaboration. So what you're going to see in the G20 is how the world needs to collaborate to build a resilient future for all the citizens of the world. So this particular forum, that is why it's focusing on that theme, where we're looking at how we can build collaboration and resilience. So one of the speakers is from Swiss Re. Swiss Re is one of the biggest reinsurers. It's definitely in the top 3 reinsurers in the world. She comes out all the way from Zurich, and she's going to speak about how governments can build resilience to deal with issues of terrorism, climate change, and cyber.
I'm wondering what practical tools, frameworks, maybe even partnerships are being discussed at the conference that could benefit businesses or government departments dealing with high-risk exposure?
Exactly. Look, the most practical tool is how do you fund a disaster. So let's say, Peter, you've got an incident in KwaZulu-Natal. There is a flooding. There is wide-scale damage that occurs there, and there is a likelihood that people will lose their job, economic growth will stagnate, and so on. The fundamental question is then, how do you fund for it? Some governments choose to fund it post-disaster. So, for instance, the government will declare a state of emergency, shift some funds from other budgetary requirements, and then redirect those funds to the disaster. So that's normally how it's been done in the world before. Right now, the thinking is that you need to pre-fund for the disaster. So you need to prepare for it. And insurance is definitely one of the best vehicles that you have to pre-fund a disaster. So you create a fund either by clients paying a premium like they do to SASRIA, or government setting aside funds from its budget to prepare for a disaster. The one thing that the insurance industry has demonstrated, and as SASRIA we did demonstrate it during July 2021, is that we can definitely respond much more faster than a government department in dispersing those funds to the needy communities.
Right.
So if you want a fast, quick response, insurance is definitely a vehicle that you have at your disposal.
For me, it's been great talking to you. We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much indeed, and good luck with the rest of your conference.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's Mpumi Chiekwe, CEO of the Underwriting and Strategy at the South African Special Risks Insurance Association, SASRIA, in the middle of an international conference taking place in Cape Town. It's time for your news. Here's Nolutando Buthelezi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thanks, Peter, and good morning. Mali's military government has announced that it had dissolved all political parties, approving a recommendation publicized last month, which spurred unprecedented protests in the capital, Bamako. A statement read on state television said that the decision had been validated by military leader Assimi Goïta, who seized power in the West African country after coups in 2020 and 2021. Last month, a national conference on political actors in Mali recommended naming Goïta a president with a 5-year mandate, as well as dissolving the parties. A senior Democrat who serves on the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee says that it's baffling as to why the Trump administration is admitting South Africa's white Afrikaners for resettlement, while continuing an indefinite suspension of thousands of other legitimate asylum seekers who have fled persecution. Senator Jean Shaheen released a statement pointing to what she called a United Nations finding that no South Africans were eligible for refugee status. Sherwin Bryce Peace reports.
Bishop Sean Rowe writes that the church would not help with the resettlement of the newly arrived white South Africans, arguing that it was painful to watch one group of refugees selected in a highly unusual manner receive preferential treatment over many others who had been waiting in refugee camps or dangerous conditions for years. The church will now end its decades-long refugee resettlement partnership with the federal government, while Senator Jean Shaheen described the admission of Afrikaners in front of others in line as a clearly politically motivated decision and an effort to rewrite history. She called on the administration to clarify why the group qualified for resettlement and why they were prioritized over others, including Afghans and Sudanese who have fled their homes due to conflict and persecution.
During a media briefing on South Africa's G20 summit preparations held in Pretoria, South Africa's Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Ronald Lamola, confirmed that all G20 member states, including their heads of state, have been invited to attend the upcoming Leaders Summit in Johannesburg. He noted that while former U.S. President Joe Biden has been invited, it will be the U.S. government to confirm his attendance. On Russia's participation, Lamula indicated that in line with recent precedent, President Vladimir Putin is not expected to attend due to International Criminal Court's ruling, with Russia likely to be represented at a ministerial level.
With regards to the Leaders Summit, who has been invited to participate, the G20 is for all members of the G20. And the leaders of the G20, they are all expected or they are invited to attend. And obviously the US President, as a member state of the G20, will be invited.
Tanzanian authorities have arrested a senior opposition official as he was departing for a political conference in Belgium. Amani Golugwa, a senior member of Tanzania's main opposition Chadema party, was arrested at Julius Nyerere International Airport in the capital Dar es Salaam on Monday. The arrest comes as fears grow of an escalating crackdown ahead of an October election. While President Samia Suluhu Hassan, who plans to seek re-election, says the government is committed to respecting human rights, a recent string of high-profile arrests has thrust her record into the spotlight. United Nations Aid Chief Tom Fletcher has condemned Israel's plan to aid distribution in Gaza. He says that it is cynical sideshow and a deliberate distraction from continued violence and displacement. Israel has said that it would not allow the entry of goods and supplies into Gaza until Palestinian militant group Hamas releases all remaining hostages. Fletcher has told the UN Security Council that no food, water, medicine or tents have entered Gaza for over 10 weeks. Palestinian ambassador to the UN, Riyad Mansour, has accused Israel of weaponizing aid.
This is engineered starvation. It is the most inhumane form of torture and killing. 2.1 million people are at risk of famine, with 500,000 faced with a catastrophic situation of hunger and starvation, illness, and death.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I am Nolutando Butelezi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In our sports headlines, the world #1 golfer Rory McIlroy says he will play in the Australian Open for the next 2 years. And the Professional Fighters League will officially launch PFL Africa with the historic mixed martial arts. I will be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Zimbabwean police have arrested 6 members of the Zimbabwe National Students Union for protesting at the University of Zimbabwe over lecturers' low salaries. University lecturers are demanding a salary of $2,250, the amount they received back in 2018, arguing that their current US salary of $219 US is inadequate. Their absence from classes due to this dispute prompted the student protests against the university administration. More from our correspondent, John Kasim, based in Harare, Zimbabwe.
Initially, the singing and chanting in the students' common room seemed harmless. However, the chilly Monday morning escalated into clashes between agitated university students, members of the Zimbabwe National Students Union, and the police. This protest resulted in the arrest of 6 student leaders who organized the demonstration. The students' demands were straightforward. They wanted the University of Zimbabwe administration to reinstate 2018 lecturer salaries of $2,250. lecturers had previously staged their own protest, leading to the arrest of their lawyer and union leaders. They have since stopped teaching and impacting students. The students' Monday protest stemmed from the fact that without the 2018 salary, lecturers would not return to work and subsequently students would not be able to take their examinations. Here is what the students said during the protest.
We are here as University of Zimbabwe students to demonstrate against the administration of Professor Paul Mafumo and Registrar Dr. Munyarazi Madambi, who are denying us the right to quality education. As students, we paid full tuition fees, and after paying full tuition fees, we expect learning services in return, and that includes lecturers teaching us in lecture rooms. But as you all know, that our lecturers are on strike. They are being underpaid. They are being paid slave wages, $229 for a lecturer, a professor, a doctor. But the solution is very simple. Pay our lecturers pre-2018 salaries of $2,250 United States dollars, and they will be back in lecture rooms.
A few days ago, the University of Zimbabwe lecturers downed tools demanding a review of their salaries from the current $219 to $2,250. They said the current salary has incapacitated them to an extent that they are no longer able to board buses to work. Previously, lecturers were employed by universities until recently when government took over. This is when the salaries were changed, rendering their wages useless, they say. While the protest and arrest of students was meant for authorities to act, chances this situation will remain for a long time are great. Here's what the student said.
But the administration of Professor Paul Mafumo and Registrar Dr. Munyarazi Madambi are trying to act as if everything is normal, of which nothing is normal. It cannot be business as usual at the University of Zimbabwe. So the students are saying we need our lecturers back, bring back our lecturers, and the solution is very simple. Pay our lecturers, compensate them fairly, pay them decent salaries, decent wages.
John Kasim in Harare, Zimbabwe for Channel Africa News.
11 minutes past 10. Let's discuss this further then and the political situation in Zimbabwe. We're now joined on the line by political analyst, author and publisher, Professor Ibo Mandaza. Professor, good morning to you. How are you on this Wednesday?
Morning, thank you.
Thanks for making time. The arrests of 6 University of Zimbabwe students on Monday after staging a protest. What were they calling for in their protest? We know there's a lecturer's absence from classes due to a pay dispute. Is that all?
That's mainly the problem. But this has to be understood in the context of an economic crisis in the country, in the midst of a wasteful expenditure on the part of sections of the leadership in Zimbabwe. The spectacle of this man who hands out vehicles and cash as like confetti in the midst of such poverty and such a crisis is really puts in sharp profile the case of the University of Zimbabwe, where lecturers, professors are getting a meager $230 a month, and it does help to also highlight the very crisis at the heart, at the core of Zimbabwe society, education. A member of the Teachers Union today highlights some of the major flaws in the education system. The number of students being sent back home for failure to pay fees, the dropout rate at primary and secondary school. It's frightening. And it's all this in sharp contrast to the situation at independence, when Zimbabwe experienced an education revolution, which is now legion throughout Africa. So this is exactly where we stand as a country, and education is only one sector, and of course the indignity of professors receiving a meager $230, and also explains why in 2025 we have a frightening statistics where almost 80% of all professional and skilled Zimbabweans outside the country. We are virtually indispensable in countries like South Africa in terms of education and health expertise, and of course this correspondingly explains the depletion of skilled and professional skills at home.
Is it a valid call then, as you make the example of South Africa in terms of what is acceptable in the region? Is it a valid call, this increase of a salary to what it was back in 2018? And also citing your previous point on wasteful expenditure, can the government afford it?
Of course it can. It can. By simply subventing some of the expenditures on luxuries to the key sectors such as education, and in particular the case of the University of Zimbabwe, or the other universities as well, state universities. It can be done, yes. The resources are there. It's just the misplaced priorities that is at issue here.
The members, the students also are members of the Zimbabwe National Students Union. We know the importance of galvanizing such when it comes to making a stand in terms of organized movements. Can the government be sending a message? And what is that message for this arrest?
Well, it's some of the pattern of state response. It's kind of knee-jerk reaction. It will continue that way, as it has been for a long time, where the state has no answer except to resort to such actions as been demonstrated. Doesn't solve the problem at all. It just exacerbates the situation in that respect.
It's been over a month of the lecturers' strike. Is the leadership of the university ignoring the class disruptions as a result of this strike and the concerns of students, as the students are accusing the leadership of the university as doing, without moving too far away from the government? We'll come back to that.
Well, it's just helplessness in the state. It is disorganized responses, mixed reactions. You have sections of the state condoning the action by the university lecturers going on strike. You have public opinion in general, as reflected in the statement by the student just now, which is in sympathy with the plight of the students and the plight of the university professors. So I think basically it's slow response, but the response will be extracted eventually by such social action as we are seeing at the moment.
What has since happened to the students who were arrested?
Well, I'm sure they're just detained, awaiting trial, the usual legal process in a very confused judiciary at the moment in Zimbabwe. Things fall apart, as someone wrote once upon a time.
Taking things back to the responsibility of government, recently war veteran Blessed Geza called for indefinite stayaways, and he is insisting that President Emmerson Mnangagwa is incapacitated and needs to leave office. What is your take on this?
Yeah, I think basically Geza's outbursts resonate with public opinion across the country. There's no doubt about that. He's just stating the obvious, about which the student and the university protests are a mere symptom, and that goes across the society as a whole. Education, health, we are in a crisis, no doubt about that. And there's no hiding it. And therefore, Geza's statements, of course, find a lot of resonance across the society.
As a region, should we be concerned that there could be fresh political instability in Zimbabwe as you speak of a crisis?
Yes, there is instability. No doubt about that. We've been in this crisis for a long time. Some of us have highlighted the plight of a state which is incapable of reform, neither political nor economic. We've been saying this for a long time.
All right. Well, we'll leave it there for now, Professor. Thanks again for your time.
Thank you.
That's a political analyst, author and publisher, Professor Ibo Mandaza, giving us the latest there in terms of lecturers at the University of Zimbabwe having gone on strike. And then over and above that, the students who are now affected in their classes and having to halt writing exams for some of them, going on their own protest against that initial protest. I'm sure that's a story that we'll be covering as Africa Rise and Shine, maybe throughout the week. It's a developing one. 20 minutes past 8.
Annie Kalonji sur Channel Africa. Nous étions en train de savourer la chanson Démocratie.
Démocratie.
Ça veut dire quoi?
Démocratie, déjà, ça dérive de démocratie, qui est le régime dans lequel nous sommes, dans notre pays. Mais j'ai plutôt pensé que nous sommes plutôt dans une démocratie.
Pourquoi?
Où il y a une cruauté tellement... une méchanceté des dirigeants envers la population. En fait, dans cette chanson, je suis en train de blâmer tout le monde. Je blâme et les dirigeants, qui pour moi sont des démocrates.
Oh, je suis maintenant en train de comprendre. Donc, démocratie. Oh Annie Kalonji, tous les dimanches sur Mix Vibration.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
We go to West Africa now. The African Union and the African Development Bank have been meeting in Lomé in Togo for a high-level summit focused on one of the continent's most pressing challenges, and that, of course, is debt. The three-day meeting, which wraps up today, aims to establish a unified African position on managing debt sustainably and also ensuring long-term economic stability. Now, with rising interest rates, limited access to concessional financing, and also ballooning debt servicing costs, many African economies are feeling the squeeze. So what are the possible outcomes of this summit, and what does Africa need to do to turn the tide? Well, to help us unpack some of these questions, we're now joined by Chifi Mahango, who's a Chief Economist at the Don Consultancy Group. Thanks so much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Good morning to you, Peter, and good morning to all your listeners across the continent.
Okay, let's start with the basics. Why is this summit in Togo so significant, and perhaps why now?
Well, I think it's quite a long story in terms of how Africa has been managing itself on the economic front. Most of the countries are actually facing issues around the fiscal processes, especially when it comes to debt management. What you find that a big chunk or share of expenditure, recurrent expenditure of most African countries, on average almost close to 80%, is being geared towards interest rates and debt repayment. So that is actually taking away a share of what can be used in terms of development expenditure on the African continent. So it is quite a significant approach in terms of ensuring that this debt element is actually reduced or in a way managed with element of fiscal consolidation, but also in element of debt restructuring. So it comes at a time when Africa is really facing those challenges as a continent.
I'm wondering, when we talk about a common African position on debt, I know that in the European Union, they are, as part of union rules, allowed to have debt levels that are set for the safety of all the countries. Can Africa have a common debt position? I mean, what does it actually mean in practical terms, especially given that the African Union isn't really the same as something like the European Union?
Well, you're quite right on that matter. I think the issue of how the African economies have been managed is more or less taking like an individual approach in issues. I think there's an element of division even across the regional levels. For example, if you look at ECOWAS and SADC, they don't have a single position. So those elements, I think, put Africa at a very difficult position in terms of ensuring that the way they manage the economies have got the same position. So Africa as a continent is very far away from the approach which is used by the European Union in terms of managing the economies. So to really come with a common approach towards debt management on the African continent, it will also take some time. Already we don't even have a common approach in terms of trade matters, even though we've got the issue of the African continental free trade area, but we have not really taken a common approach in issues like that. So doing that kind of approach in terms of on the fiscal side might also, it's a good way to start, but it will take a little bit of a longer period in terms of taking a common approach across the continent.
So what could possibly come out of Lome?
Well, one expects that from the point of view of how the African countries are managing their economies, there must be an approach to which one is about dealing with the core issues why African countries are in this position. I think fiscal discipline, it becomes one of the key factors. Reducing the element of corruption also is one of the key factors that also needs to be looked at. But also, how you utilize your debt can also be a key factor. In the essence that if for example, if this debt is mainly used for consumption, then it becomes a problem. But I think most of the African countries should look at taking a debt which is towards productive expenditure. So, for example, a debt where you go and borrow to utilize in terms of construction activities such as roads, railway, bridges, and so forth is more productive than the kind of debt we are used towards paying of salaries. So I think there must be a way of looking at a restructuring of the fiscal position on the African continent so that the debt that is there should become more productive than consumptive approach, which is happening now.
How did we get here? Are these self-inflicted wounds, or have the donors, the people that have afforded us the debt, been key into the situation that we're in, whether it's unaffordable interest rates or harsh conditions? What happened?
I think the challenges of the African economies has been such a way that the revenue base has actually been very narrow. Most of the African economies, in terms of the revenue base, is more towards the personal income tax. And if you look at from that perspective, you find that that has actually not been growing for a long period of time because of the unemployment challenges on the African continent. So once you've got high unemployment on the continent, obviously you don't have a strong revenue base in terms of personal income. So that's some of the challenges that the continent has actually been facing. Is a narrowing revenue base, which has not been supportive enough from the budgetary process point of view.
How significant in all of those equations has bad leadership or mismanagement been?
Well, bad leadership has actually been a significant factor to it. Issue of governance on the African continent has been a big challenge, where there has been reckless expenditure. That's a topic some of us have actually been dealing with it for a long period of time. There's element of reckless expenditure in such a way that the huge administrative cost have actually been one of the significant issues that African countries have actually faced, where you find that 80% of the recurrent expenditure is towards administrative cost. So all those elements, I think, have actually put the continent to where it is now. So you've got a booming environment in which wage bills have been on the rise on most of the African economies. So most of these wage bills are actually more towards the politicians or high-level administrative in the government departments, which have actually not been productive enough in terms of supporting the African economy from the fiscal element point of view.
Okay, and perhaps finally, if you can answer this briefly, can we get out of this mess, genuinely?
You know, the problem about debt is that once you have debt, it becomes like a cycle which continues for a very long period of time, because the interest payment of the debt most African countries have will take a long period of time to actually cover. So I think the best African country can manage from this perspective is to actually restructure this debt, but also minimize the debt that the countries are getting from most of these multilateral organizations, but also to take an approach which says that debt should be more focused on productive expenditure, and that's the only way we can get out of this situation. But as long as the current environment continues, then it might take forever for the African countries to come out of this process, because you can never repay debt once you have entered the process.
Chief Mhango, it's always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much indeed. Your insights always greatly appreciated.
Thank you very much, Peter.
Thank you so much. All right, that's where we'll leave that discussion, Africa debt. And it may be difficult for you to process because we have pretty much all the resources in terms of minerals that the world needs. The continent is not poor. Something else is letting us down, that's for sure. 7:30 was an hour ago, which means it's 8:30 right now, and it's time for your news headlines. Here's Nolutando Butelezi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Mali's military government has announced that it had dissolved all political parties, approving a recommendation publicized last month, which spurred unprecedented protests in the capital, Bamako. A senior Democrat who serves in the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee says it is baffling as to why the Trump administration is admitting South Africa's white Afrikaners. And United Nations Aid Chief Tom Fletcher has condemned Israel's plan for aid distribution in Gaza. I'll have details at the top of the hour.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Let's get the latest from the world of sports for the final time on this Wednesday on Rise and Shine. Here's Figile Lingwati with your details.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
We start off with fighting and boxing. The Professional Fighters League, PFL, will officially launch PFL Africa with a historic mixed martial arts MMA debut event on the 26th of July at the Grand West Arena in Cape Town. The launch event will also feature the opening round of the 2025 PFL Africa tournament, with rising stars from across the continent battling it out in the heavyweight, bantamweight divisions, each featuring an 8-man bracket, with fighters advancing through semi-finals and finals. PFL Africa General Manager Elias Schulz explains.
You know, we're coming to Cape Town to kick off the tournament in late July. But what inspired it, I mean, honestly, Africa has world-class fighters, and they deserve a world-class stage. And that's what PFL Africa is all about. It was born out of the vision of our chairman, Francis Ngannou, the famous Cameroonian fighter who is a champion for Africa and a champion for MMA. And, of course, Don Davis and Pete Murray, of PFL Global.
The highly experienced administrator Schulz unpacks the impact PFL Africa will have on the continent.
First, what kind of makes this a little bit unique is that, we try to bring a true season format to African MMA. Right, so the way we think about meritocratic sports, right? You beat your opponent and you move on to the next thing. And if you keep winning, then you become the ultimate champion of your weight class. So, we want to embed the MMA culture, which is already there. Right? You can go across the continent. You see small boxing fights happening or martial arts gyms in even second, third tier cities, right? People are hungry for this.
On to football news. Paris Saint-Germain's dynamic right back Ashraf Hakimi has clinched the Marc Vivien Foe Award, crowning him League One Standout African Player for the 2024-2025 season. The Moroccan star outshone Nantes' Moses Simon, Nice' Even Goussand, and Strasbourg Habib Diarra to claim the prestigious honor, named after the late Cameroonian midfielder who tragically passed away in 2003. Hakimi played a pivotal role as PSG secured their record-extending 13th League One title. His contributions also propelled the Parisians to the Champions League final, where they will face Inter Milan on the 31st of May. The versatile defender sealed his case with a crucial goal in PSG's 2-1 Champions League semi-final victory over Arsenal, showcasing his attacking flair from the right flank. Now, cricket news. Pakistan have appointed Mike Hesson as their new coach for all short formats, replacing Aqib Javed, who was in an interim role for the last 5 months. Gary Kirsten abruptly resigned 6 months into a 2-year contract as head coach when Javed took over the reins on a temporary basis. Hesson enjoyed a fruitful time, 6 years as head coach of New Zealand when he was appointed in 2012, with the Black Caps becoming a force in world cricket, including reaching their first World Cup final in 2015, where they lost to Australia. Hesson is currently the coach of Pakistan Super League PSL outfit Islamabad United and will start his tenure with the national side at the conclusion of the T20 franchise tournament. Now, let's end with tennis news. The world number one, Jannik Sinner, came through the first true test of his comeback from a doping ban with straight sets win over Francesco Cerundolo, which took him into the Italian Open quarterfinals. Italian Sinner bested 17th seed Cerundolo 7-6, 7-2 and 6-3 in a match which was delayed by a couple of hours due to a torrential downpour to set up a last 8 clash with either Casper Ruud or Jean Munar. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fidel Ngwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Hi there. Do you want to elevate your business and give it a voice in South Africa and Africa as a whole? Well, in that case, let Channel Africa make this a possibility. Channel Africa is willing to advertise your business for as little as 30,000 rands or $1,719.18. To get access to these great rates, send all requests to mukwenata@SABC. That's MOKOENATA@SABC. Channel Africa, the African Perspective.
8:36, it's time for us to look and see what's been happening in the world of business, commerce and industry. And with the news is Buntle Headbush.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thanks, Peter, and good morning to our listeners. Black South Africans are the largest groups that suffers unemployment among all other population groups. That's according to the latest government data that shows that unemployment among Black South Africans remains above the country's very high unemployment rate. In the first 3 months of this year, the unemployment level increased by 1 percentage point to 32.9% of the workforce. Dimakadzo Lishuru has the details.
Despite claims by some white South Africans of economic exclusion and hardships because of policies like affirmative action and employment equity that they say favor the Black African population in South Africa, this group remains the most affected by unemployment. At 81% of the country's population, Black South Africans constitute the biggest population group, yet their unemployment rate exceeds the national unemployment average, and Black women are the most vulnerable when it comes to joblessness.
South Africa's Electricity and Energy Minister, Kgosientshe Ramokgopa, will this morning update the media in Pretoria on the status of South Africa's electricity generation performance. This after power utility Eskom's announcement yesterday that it would implement Stage 2 rolling blackouts during evening peak periods. Energy and Electricity spokesperson Zakane Kambane.
The Minister of Electricity and Energy, Dr. Kgosientshe Ramokgopa, will provide a comprehensive update on South Africa's electricity generation performance. This follows Eskom's implementation of Stage 2 load shedding due to capacity challenges. These include delays in returning generation units from maintenance, impacting our power supply.
The Cobalt Institute says demand for cobalt will rise faster than supply in the coming years. This will allow the market to reduce the surplus and swing to a deficit by the early 2030s. The Institute says this in the short term, the future of the cobalt market depends on what the Democratic Republic of Congo, the world's top producer of the mineral used to make lithium-ion batteries, decides to do after its 4-month export ban imposed in late February. Meanwhile, the DRC's Congo's Minister of Mines, Kizito Pakabomba, says the country's 4-month ban on cobalt exports is under review. He made the announcement at a cobalt industry conference in Singapore today without giving any further details. The country imposed the ban on the battery metal in February this year to control the oversupply in the international market. Moving further afield, U.S. President Donald Trump has made a number of announcements in Saudi Arabia, his first stop on his tour of the Middle East. He was speaking after lunch with the Saudi Prince Mohammed bin Salman hosted. Trump says that the two have signed commercial agreements worth more than $600 billion or nearly 11 trillion rand. Trump's announcement included this message to Iran.
If I can make a deal with Iran, I'll be very happy if we're going to make your region and the world a safer place. But if Iran's leadership rejects this olive branch and continues to attack their neighbors, then we will have no choice but to inflict massive maximum pressure, drive Iranian oil exports to zero, and take all action required to stop the regime from ever having a nuclear weapon. Iran will never have a nuclear weapon.
Taking a look at the indicators, $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 600. In Botswana, it's at 13.46. Kenya, the dollar is at 128 shilling 305, and in Zambia, it's at 26 kwacha 48. Moving to the BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 rand 64, Russia 80 rubles 40, India 85 rupees 8. In China, it's 7 yuan 20, and South Africa, $1 is trading at 18 rand 30. $1 is trading at 75 pence to the British pound, 89 to the euro. Taking a look at the commodities, gold is trading at $3,232 and platinum at $988 per ounce, while Brent crude oil is at $66.17 a barrel. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Buntle Hetbush.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Call us on +27 63 406 9126.
I can see my whole world changing.
And contribute to the conversation.
My name is Neto, NETO Chamani. Osiatiko, Nengezimo, Mkhanju, Phandle kunjani moyani. Voko tendele. Africa at Play, asteleli siyashaya. Africa's velvet voice is in the house. Africa at Play is a place to be, where we speak all things sport and music, from the African continent to the rest of the world. We speak to your bundles of joy in sport, 12-year-olds and below, teenagers in sport. And we speak to elite athletes, administrators, coaches, and all the behind behind the scenes stakeholders of sport and music. Africa at Play, asideleli siyashaya. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
It's Channel Africa's birthday month. Celebrate Africa's voice with us. Catch us on SABC Plus, DSTV Audio Bouquet 802, and Satellite Channel PAS 10. Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine.
I want the Africa that makes every single African proud of the continent and have hope. And there's so much stuff that's going on that's positive. And if we can just lock into that, Namaganjani, everyone is going to get there.
Where are we going? Where are we trying to get to?
The idea of working together, which is why I'm excited about this new voice.
And the new voice is me, Asanda, Beda, broadcast journalist with about 15 years of experience on the radio space.
Welcome, Asanda. I've been waiting for you for a long time.
Were you waiting for me?
I was.
Really?
Yeah, because for 3 months I was on my own.
So be sure to tune in right here on Channel Africa Mondays to Fridays from 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time.
If you want to know about your continent, this is the best place to start your day.
Rise and Shine on Channel Africa. Ahoy, matey!
Captain here to help, right, boys?
Set sail with us on a digital voyage like no other. Channel Africa has a treasure trove of awesomeness. That is our website and social media pages.
Tell me, why are you here?
We want you to be part of our adventure.
The winds are changing, Captain. And this time...
Imagine a world where curiosity knows no bounds, where entertainment meets enlightenment, and where every click leads to the African perspective. Visit us on our website, www.channelafrica.co.za, or follow us on Instagram or on X at Channel Africa 1. Go on, like us on Facebook at Channel Africa 1. So, spread the word. Tell a friend that Channel Africa's online variety is what they need on the web. Channel Africa, the African perspective. A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
It's 8:45 Central African Time. Let's talk about women on the continent and entrepreneurship now. Across the continent, women are significantly underrepresented in many spheres, from political decision-making, challenges in areas like access to finance and land ownership. A Pan-African initiative dedicated to addressing this by bridging the gap between ambition and opportunity for emerging African women leaders was recently launched. Her Circle, the debut salon-style event heralding the Heritage Collective concept, is described by one of the conveners as a disruption and a space that invites women to the table and challenges them to design the table themselves. For more, we joined on the line by Sally Namani, who is social entrepreneur and co-convener behind the Heritage Collective. We're going to try and get a hold of her. She's not there yet, I'm being told. Let's take a short break as we make our way to that chat.
Kodi mumadziwa bwino kuwerenga ndi kuyankhula chinyanja, mumakonda ntchito ya wireless, mumafuna mutagwira ntchito mdziko la South Africa, nanga muli ndi mapepala okulolezani kugwira ntchito mu South Africa. Ngati muli ndi yankho la zonsezi, ndiye kuti muli ndi mwayi ogwira ntchito kuno ku Channel Africa. Tumizani CV yanu ndi mawu anu kuno ku Channel Africa ku email ya newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Chonde ngati simunalandire uthenga kuchokera ku Channel Africa nyengo ya masiku 14 pambuyo potumiza CV yanu, ndiye kuti simunasankhidwe. Channel Africa, kalilole wa Africa.
If you are an upcoming artist looking to showcase your music to a wider audience, or just looking to promote your music on the radio, we can help. But there are a few things you can do to increase your chances of success. 1. Send your music to music@channelafrica.co.za. 2. We require the following information to help you best: your label, your ISRC code, title of the song, performer, composer, publisher, author, language, genre. These are the things we would like to compose your musical bio. 3, listen to Channel Africa play your music on the radio. The perfect soundtrack for your day. With Channel Africa and your music, you will never be bored because we play your music. Experience the best African music on Channel Africa, the African perspective. Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
The departure of more than 41 South Africans for resettlement in the USA is not a security or sovereign threat. This is according to the Minister in the Presidency, Kumbunzo Ntshavheni, who said, and the Police Minister, as well as Senzo Mchunu, who took part in an oral question and answer session in the National Council of Provinces. The first batch of Afrikaners left the country under refugee status, according to the Trump administration. This to help them escape a so-called genocide against them. Zelene Merrington reports.
This week, a small group of Afrikaners left South Africa to seek greener pastures in the Trump-led USA. And while they left under a so-called threat on their lives, government does not think it poses a security risk, says Minister Ntshavheni.
And I'm sure members will be tempted to say the 49 people who moved from being citizens to become refugees, is that a threat to national sovereignty? It's not a threat to national sovereignty. It's not a threat to national unity. And we must continue to applaud the Afrikaner and white community that have said, not in our name, there is no genocide of white people in South Africa.
She added that those who visited the White House, including lobby groups, AfriForum and Solidarity, will have to answer following an investigation into treason.
The law enforcement agencies are investigating the Treasonous Act of misinformation and also that which is provided for in the, I forgot the right naming of the act that talks about treason in the country. And unfortunately, I can't go into the detail of that because it will compromise then the work of the law enforcement agencies. But we continue to make sure that the Treasonous Acts cannot be left unpunished.
This while the men and women in blue are under pressure to effectively investigate cases of state capture. Police Minister Senzo Mchunu says 19 cases involving government and private entities are being investigated. 4 cases are on the court roll, 2 are pending decisions from the National Prosecuting Authority, another 6 are under investigation, and 7 cases have been finalized with 4 convictions. But Mchunu says he understands the frustration that investigations take very long.
We note the concern of delays. Had it been for us, we would have had all these cases finalized just like the 4, and having like the 7 more than those and at an advanced stage. Because ultimately all of us are seeking justice and fairness arising from those matters of state capture.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Women across the continent are significantly underrepresented in many spheres, from political decision-making, challenges in areas like access to finances and land ownership. A Pan-African initiative dedicated to addressing this by bridging the gap between ambition and opportunity for emerging African women leaders was recently launched. Her Circle, the debut salon-style event heralding the Heritage Collective concept, is described by one of the conveners as a disruption and a space that invites women to the table and challenges them to design the table themselves. For more on this, we're joined on the line by Sally Namani, who is a social entrepreneur and co-convener behind the Heritage Collective. Sally, a very good morning to you, and thank you for making time to chat to us on Africa Rise and Shine.
Yes, good morning. I hope you can hear me well. My network hasn't been the best. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. No, we can definitely hear you now. Let's hope all goes well for the rest of this chat. Tell us more about this initiative and explain this concept of a space that invites women to be on the table, but also challenges them to design the table themselves. I love it.
So the Heritage Collective is really about bridging the gap between access and ambition for African emerging women leaders. We recognize that one of the the barriers that keep women behind is being under-networked. And so we've created a space that convenes women at different points in their careers that's really less about gatekeeping and more about extended networks and sharing expertise. That is the vision behind the Heritage Collective, and we were so proud to launch our inaugural event on the sidelines of the Africa CEO Forum this week.
What falls under the areas of focus for the Heritage Collective concept? Hello, Sally? We seem to have lost network again. Sally Namani is social entrepreneur and co-convener behind the Heritage Collective, talking to us about the Her Circle as well as the Heritage Collective concept. We hear concept in terms of we mustn't just sit on the table, but we must design the table ourselves. We're going to be woodworkers. What does that mean? I really wanted to get deeper into that. I love the phrase, though. I think we'll try and catch up on this later on in the week. Our lines are just not cooperating with us at this very stage.
Right. So earlier on, you did an interesting interview in Zimbabwe with Professor Ibo Mandazam. And the issue at play right now was university lecturers had gone on strike, saying that they wanted at least $250 a month.
2250.
Yeah, from what they're earning right now. So just to give you context of what they're earning, university lecturers, just put that in your mind now. The kind of studying and learning that you need to have done to get to a point where you're teaching people at tertiary institutions.
Yeah.
Tertiary institution educators in Zimbabwe earn less than petrol attendants in South Africa. That is the reality.
Yeah, that's insane.
So you can imagine.
I mean, if they were saying that they can't even afford bus fare to get to the lectures, that's insane.
Yeah, and so it is a fight. It is a struggle, and at one stage, the University of Zimbabwe was one of the most highly rated universities on the continent and comparable with many universities around the world. And sadly, because of issues like this, what you've seen is this massive brain drain. Top professors, top teachers going to other parts of the world, including South Africa, and taking their skills and their knowledge and teaching at other institutions.
And it has to be balanced according to regional standards. There's nothing that is as important as education and health. And, there are just those pillars that need to be the strongest in our society, and we need to support.
Pay them what they're worth.
Exactly.
Pay them what they're worth.
On the Move is coming up next after Rise and Shine, and Benjamin joins us. Now I can't say your full name. I'm going to be I'm being too formal. So it's a Wednesday. It's Benjamin today. How are you?
Hey, how are you guys doing?
Good morning, Brother Benjamin.
Cool, man. I mean, this one's going to be an interesting one. I don't know what to think about the subject matter. And I don't know how to individualize it, right? Do you guys believe in collective traumas, as a people that we can have a collective trauma?
I think it does. I actually believe it does, because also as people, we're not just flesh and blood.
Sure.
We are spirit. So, and that spirit is something that transcends all types of eras, all types of borders, all types of geographical settings. So we definitely do.
Proof of this, and this is a very simple, crude example. Watch a football match and see how a losing team
I know. I'm a Pirates fan. I felt it this weekend.
And that just shows you how we can collectively feel something at the same time. And another interesting thing, locusts. I don't know if you've ever observed them. Often they run around on their own.
Sure.
As soon as a swarm starts, they leave what they're doing and they join the swarm. Again, that collective mentality.
Nice.
We're not very different from them, I promise you.
And that's what we want to investigate today in terms of, are we dealing with it individually as Africans, or are we dealing with it in our different silos, because we've had like collective traumas like apartheid, we've had like tribal
Genocide.
conflicts,
slavery,
we've had genocides, we've had slavery, we still have economic traumas to deal with even today. And how do we navigate those conversations? Because I feel like it's conversations we've never really had, and sometimes we're trying to kind of deal with it from an individual, personalized view.
It is interesting, but I mean, whilst it is collective pain, it's experienced individually.
Yeah.
So,
but the healing and the therapy, how does it take place?
Everything still happens individually, even though it's collective in its manifestation. You feel it individually, and so the healing, you can try a national project, as we did try here in South Africa
with the TRC,
with
which people
Rainbow
are questioning
Nation,
that
you name it. In the end, actually, you go home alone.
Yeah.
And the taxman has got your ID number alone.
Yeah, so that's going to be an interesting one.
I do think though, World Cup 2010.
That was nice. That was some good therapy.
That could be a signal that there's a collective thing that you can rally behind.
Yeah.
World Cup 1990.
And as you mentioned that, actually, I think it's easier for us to band when it's a positive experience.
Yeah.
That one becomes clearer.
Yes.
But when it's a traumatic one,
but
we
the
go
healing
into our different corners.
So the healing is talking about maybe finding something positive to hold on to might be the way to deal with collective trauma, to find something positive to collectively hang on to.
Yeah, so it's going to be it's already a debate in here, so I'm looking forward to that.
Wow.
Yeah,
Manchester United supporters, Orlando Pirates supporters, we're collective pain, man.
I feel sorry for the Man United fans.
Oh, man.
Well, we'll see you guys tomorrow, 6 till 9. Thank you so much for tuning in to Rise and Shine on this Wednesday, the 14th of May. It's literally halfway through the month tomorrow.
My goodness.
Yeah.
Wow.
From us for now.
Have an awesome day, everybody. Take care. Up next is the news with Nolutando Butelezi.
It's the only international station that speaks to Africa in its own voices. English, Kiswahili, Chinyanja, French, and Portuguese. The languages that unite 1 billion people. SABC News. The African Perspective.